Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and I am wearing 2 pairs of gloves, just in case.
And my name is Scott Daly, and I've got my bag of blood crumbs to leave a trail as we journey through this labyrinthian novel, which is a word, by the way. I just wrote it down, and my computer said, yes, that's a word.
Sure.
This is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of efficient glove removal, Amy, unfortunately, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, we continue to watch cracks appear in Arc 14 Breaking, reading chapters 14.8 and 14.9. Victoria and company adjust to life in prison, which involves being extremely uncomfortable, having frank discussions about your relationship status, and getting all the skin ripped off your fingers. When seeking medical attention, Victoria bumps into Amy. And by bumps into, I mean Amy used this opportunity to violate Victoria again. It's just the worst. Matt, what did you think of these 2 chapters?
I mean, it's strange because you can't just say, I love these chapters, because it was like being kicked in the nads twice consecutively. Yeah. But from a writing perspective and a storytelling perspective, they're brilliant, and I do love them. They're harrowing and painful, and at this point certainly we are so in Victoria's corner. We're so attached to her as our point of view and our protagonist that we really kind of feel the pain when she is hurt, which again is good storytelling. But like Wildbow is really, I mean, I would call what happens in 14.9 one of the points that the story has been building up to. Like we've kind of known from a storytelling point of view that was going to happen the whole time. Yeah, we did, and I don't think it went where I thought it was going to with that. Like I knew this confrontation was coming. I knew this moment was going to come. I didn't expect it to come in the way it did. That was the shocking part for me. Yeah. And it's really handled in really wonderful ways. So yeah, I mean, we're going to talk with, I think, the same level of excitement we always have towards the story because we love the story so much. But the tone of the content this week is a lot more dire, a lot more serious, a lot rougher than a lot of the stuff we see. Yeah, right. There's definitely, I was having some kind of mental whiplash this week because I was like, well, I'm obviously going to geek out about the writing just as much as I always do, but the subject matter that's being portrayed through the writing is not something that one should be flippant about. So yeah, absolutely, gonna have to be balanced on that, I think. Yeah, so we're gonna try to keep the right tone throughout all this stuff while also really enjoying what the book is doing, because I'm with you. I think everything throughout that scene, that conversation, another moment in this book, in this arc that is serious conversation, and it's fantastically done. Yeah. So yeah, let's move on into the chapters. Sure. So we start 14.8, and it's actually kind of nice because things aren't immediately super terrible, right? Yeah. So first of all, we check back in with Breakthrough plus Golem and Vista, the gang having set up their little camp to take advantage of the security cameras to keep the other prisoners from bothering them. Yeah, and I think you're right that this is, at least the first half of this chapter is relatively okay, right? Yeah, I do think like taking some time to talk about the setting construction here is probably worth it, because I think the detail here is really wonderful. We've got this prison with a glass roof. It has a lot of glass walls. We're seeing that the people of Shen really like glass, don't they? They really enjoy glass in their architecture. We get these notes that it's clearly not fully sealed because it's leaking, like the ice or the snow is melting against the glass and leaking through. And so they're a drippy, wet place. So it's this cold, kind of dank,
miserable place. Victoria describes it as a labyrinth, and that's a description she's going to carry throughout both of these chapters tonight, especially when she starts to fall back on the tension of walking through the hallways. And I like, there's windows everywhere. They're exposed to people and elements. The hallways are at an incline for probably just to make it uncomfortable. Just like, anytime I think of like a prison with an incline, my mind immediately goes to the sky cells in the Vale in A Song of Ice and Fire. Which, I mean, that was way crueler because it was inclined off the edge of a cliff, but my head just goes there immediately. So I just imagine this terrible, uncomfortable situation they're in.
Yeah, I like that connection a lot. I mean, I think that like you said, this is kind of a subtly horrible prison, right? Mm-hmm. Like the ground isn't like lined with spikes, right? It's just slightly sloped so that it's impossible to relax.
Yeah.
It's like everything about it is uncomfortable and designed for suffering. Like it kind of reminds me of like a purgatory or something, where it's like everything about it is designed to be unpleasant and unsatisfactory.
Yeah. I mean, there seems to be very little private areas because of those glass walls, because the guards need to look and be able to see through everything, which makes sense in a prison. But yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's not good.
Yeah.
But our characters are doing okay for now.
Yeah. They're sticking together at least, right? Like at least there's some solidarity and security they're getting from each other. They're staying together. They're a team. Mm-hmm. So I like the text. The text here says, and Victoria is thinking this: stay in sight, stay clearly under the cameras. We were in a position to manipulate and be model prisoners. That was the game, the charade. It was a game we could cheat at in small ways. Kinsey was a big factor in that, with an eye on the same cameras the guards used. So I like this bit here because here Wildbow's telling us what the game is. Mm-hmm. Like, this is what's going on. And I know we've pointed this out before, but I find myself endlessly appreciating how he just kind of sometimes will tell us what's up when it's important. Because I've read so many books that are like an abstruse puzzle for no real reason. Like, you're just like, okay, but what the fuck is actually like going on? Like, I can't care about what's happening because I don't understand what's happening. And Wildbow is very good about knowing, like, I'm gonna just have the characters say right out in like very briefly, this is what we're trying to do here. This is the situation. And they're like, okay, got it. Let's move forward. And I think this is especially needed in a disorienting and unusual environment and context like this alien prison that they're in.
Yeah, I agree. There are moments in storytelling where ambiguity is good and necessary and helps with the tension or the drama of the scene. And there's moments where you don't want to rely on subtext to communicate your message. You want some of the stuff to just be clear and accepted and straightforward. And this is one of those moments. I agree. The emotion of this scene, this area, this part of the story we're in, is not connected to what are the heroes trying to do? What are the bad guys trying to do? It is more Amy specific. It is more revolving around this Victoria-Amy relationship. That other stuff is not as important. So there's no reason for it to not be clear.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this because Victoria is like actually a really good character for that general idea. Just like her scholarly analytical nature enjoys breaking down situations like this in a way that like makes it very clear to us as well as her. And it's been a while, I think, since you and I have compared Victoria to Taylor, but it strikes me that back in Worm, we kind of made similar comments about Taylor that was like, oh, she's the perfect personality to be the point of view character of the story. And I think we're seeing kind of the same thing with Victoria here. And like, I thought that, and I was like, well, that's faulty logic. Like, of course she is. Like, the story's built around. That's like saying, isn't it crazy how the Earth just so happens to be the perfect planet to support human life? Of course it does. Right. That's how that happened. But I think that is a strength to the writing, that like you take your character, you define your character's traits, and then you kind of build the story around ways in which you can take maximum advantage of those traits.
Yeah, that's really well said. I'm fascinated by this particular thing that Wildblood does here, because I think that I have for most of my life actually misunderstood the adage "show don't tell," because I think that I have typically applied it in some places where it shouldn't be, and then not applied it in places where it should be. And this is one where like I might, if I were writing a story, I might say like, well, I'm not just going to tell the reader what's going on in the situation, because that's telling. I should show what's going on in the situation. And the thing is, like, nah, there's no reason why you shouldn't just clarify the situation. Like, I mean, first of all, he is showing us the situation. He's just also making sure that it's clear on top of that. And it doesn't take anything away from it. Like, the place where you want to show, don't tell is like the details of character interactions and how they are internally and amongst themselves. Like, that's a place where humans are good at and want to make inferences, but we don't want to be like, it's like a burden to make us make inferences when it's like, okay, what's happening? What like, if you don't know what's happening, then you can't care. So
yeah. And I've been critical of the story in the past, of moments where I thought it made things a little too explicit. This is not one of them for me. No, I think this is absolutely necessary. It helps frame the conflict around with that we're going to see with this gang coming up in a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. So apparently Kinsey is now doing some tinkering using irritating humming. And also Kinsey is connected to all three of her teammates around the clock, including while sleeping, which we kind of suspected, but this is made explicit, and the team discusses it in this chapter.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it's interesting, though, because I feel like we talked about this a bit last week, but I feel like we've been going kind of back and forth with Kinsey a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. We talked a bit ago about how we're seeing all these red flags, and it got me really stressed out about her. And then last week we had this amazing moment with Chris that I think was symbolic of some real understanding achieved and growth in the character. She said bad things about a person she liked, Matt. That's wow. But we still do have these moments of concern, like Kinsey, Aiden, and Darlene just being connected to each other basically constantly now, scares the shit out of me. It really does. Like, I worry, like, you think back, like Aiden was talking to Victoria not too long ago about how he was feeling a little overwhelmed with the amount of connection with Kinsey now, right? And he's too nice of a guy to be like, hey, disconnect me.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm just seeing all three of them connected, and I'm wondering what's going on in his head, and it really, really, really scares me.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because these aren't necessarily the kinds of things that I cue into when I'm reading. So I actually kind of like it that you're pointing that out, because now that you do point it out, I'm like, I imagine her team being like having conversations where they're like, I really want to disconnect. But if we disconnect, then we can't reconnect to Kinsey, and right. she'll freak out. And so we don't want to do that to her, but also I kind of want to disconnect. Like I don't know that's what's happening, but like you just imagine the stress this is putting on everything pretty much.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also a part of it where you're like, hey, Darlene needs connections. Mm-hmm. Kinsey likes connection. Maybe these are the perfect friends for each other. Like, in the back of your head, you're like, maybe it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And I think the text is fairly intentionally ambiguous about this as well, because I think even Victoria's like, I don't know. Like, when Vista says this weird and creepy, her response is, yeah. And she laughs and says, absolutely. But it's complicated. And I mean, like that acknowledgement that this is not just a simple of like, Kinsey, you must stop doing this, that it's more complicated than that. And how to approach this is complex, and how to approach Kinsey is complex. I really like it. I like that there's no easy answer here. It's very easy for me to say that connection while sleeping, that's bad. But we talk about, it's helping her sleep, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't necessarily think it's a terrible thing. I think it's the kind of thing where maybe they're overdoing it right now, and they'll rein it in, and they'll have some mature boundaries around it. Like, they're kids, they're still learning, they're still experimenting with their powers, and it's one of those things where like it seems like a red flag, but it could just be like, I think the amount of time that I spent in like chat rooms when I was 14 was probably also like not like unhealthy in a similar way to this constantly being connected thing.
Oh my God, so many chat rooms. You just gave me all kinds of flashes, and that's
right. If you judged me based on the chat rooms that I was in, then you'd probably be really worried. But now I'm like, now I'm.
You're okay now.
I'm okay now. I'm not that on my. Oh, I am.
Oh no. Yeah. No, I get you. I got you.
I loved Ashley trying to reassure her though that Kinsey has Ashley at least. She says, I've died a bunch of times and I'm still here. which is delightful. And then Kenzie falls asleep using Ashley's leg as a pillow.
Yeah, I mean, I love that Ashley line, but Kenzie's right here. Like, they're capes. Like, Ashley will be here for her as long as she's still alive, but they're capes. Yeah. Ashley could die tomorrow. And, like, it's a great comfort for sure, but it's not a solution. Mm-hmm. Definitely not. It's not something that's just going to make Kenzie go, oh, okay. You love it because you love Ashley and you love that she means exactly what she says there, that she is fully committed to Kenzie and always will be. But yeah, they're capes.
Yeah, I'm catching this kind of background theme with Kenzie where she's beginning to realize maybe that like no matter what she does, there's always the risk that she could lose her important people. And which is like a terrible, terrifying thought to her, even more than it is for a regular kid. Even people who don't have Kenzie's issues struggle with these thoughts.
Yeah.
And yeah, she could lose Ashley, but like, and maybe she's coming to a more mature understanding of like, well, yeah, you could lose anyone at any time. It's true. It's just true, right?
Yeah,
and it sucks, but we like as humans have to kind of find a way to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of part of growing up a little bit is realizing that the impermanence of everything.
Yeah. So I love Ashley looking at Victoria to confirm that she's aware of the gang of prisoners that are kind of encroaching on them, and Vicky noticing her quote unquote almost normal eyes.
Isn't that fascinating? Because like, Ashley's eyes have been this recurring beat for us, especially recently. Like seeing the lack of anything in Ashley's eyes as a moment of fear or concern about how she's doing. And now we get her in a place where she's got the pupil thing turned off. She's got the smokiness turned off. They're just her eyes now. And yet Victoria says, almost normal, not normal. Her eyes look normal. They're almost normal, right?
Yeah.
I think that's so fascinating that like there's to Victoria, there's still something in her expression that is just slightly off of normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think and that's the thing is I was like, wait a minute, is it just that her irises are really pale? Is that what makes it not normal, or is it just that Ashley is a bit off to her?
I think she's just a little bit off. Yeah. Like Ashley has made such progress and she's great. But she, as we'll see in this conversation right here, she still approaches things from a different perspective than Victoria does. And I think that to me, that translates in how she describes the way she looks.
Yeah. I like that. Sorry. Yeah. So there's this interaction between them. Like you were saying, it indicates kind of that there is a disconnect between them, but they still get along really well. And sure. it's just like, so Ashley says if her path to happiness means weirdness or blackmailing her parents or staying up late tinkering, then I'll support that. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it does require those things, but if it did, or if it does in the future, I wouldn't necessarily stand in her way. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. That's great.
It is. I like it a lot. And it's this kind of fascinating rumination on how to assist someone in their recovery, right? Mm-hmm. And we kind of go back to Kenzie's. We didn't read Kenzie's monologue, but she sits there and tells what the spooky stuff is. Being alone, spending her life pushing things away, never having anyone for Christmas. Christmas is just herself, just buying herself a present, and always me smiling, sending treats to the needy for Christmas and doing Tinker stuff too, because I always got to do Tinker stuff. And it's just really, and you can kind of hear Kenzie's voice. She's probably saying it very fast. There's no pausing between words. There's some commas in the sentence for grammar purposes, but I don't think Kenzie pauses. And yeah, what she's basically arguing here is that like she lays asleep, she lays in her bed at night and all this stuff hits her thoughts and she has trouble breathing, and connecting to Darlene and Aiden calms that anxiety, like feels their calmer breathing, and that calms her down. And that's what the argument here is, that like if Kenzie's path going forward involves needing stuff like this, stuff that people would call creepy and weird, Ashley says, well, then she should get that.
Yeah.
And there are problems to that mythology, of course. Like there are going to be issues, like saying if she needs to blackmail her parents in order to be okay, well, shit, then blackmail those parents. Not great, but I love it. Represents like this kind of love that Ashley has for Kenzie, like, and not unconditional almost.
Yeah,
like,
I was basically going to say that Ashley, I think, loves Kenzie more like a sister or even like a mother, a big sister maybe, or a mother. I mean, it's all kind of the same emotional package, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think Victoria is very fond of Kenzie, considers herself somewhat responsible for Kenzie, for taking care of her, for mentoring her. But it's not at all the same kind of emotional valence.
Yeah.
And I mean, it reminds me, like, this is a weird place to take it maybe, but like it reminds me of the whole concept of the show Dexter, and like specifically like how the conceit of the show is like his father or whatever like realized that he was basically a killer at heart, and so channeled his terrible tendencies into something that was like acceptable and like moral within certain bounds. And it's this, it's funny because like as a parent, you think you as soon as you become aware of the Dexter concept, you're like, would I help my child be a better serial killer? And I mean, I think the answer is like, probably, honestly. But like what I'm getting at is, I think that Ashley is basically saying, I'm on Kenzie's side no matter what. And I will help her do things that are even quote unquote bad or even actually bad if it helps her.
I don't know if there's quote unquoting and blackmail.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. There's actually a book I read about that. It's called Defending Jacob. The concept of the novel is like a lawyer's son is charged with murder, and he's defending his son in court. He's kind of slowly realizing over time that, oh crap, there's a good chance my kid actually did this. And like, what do you do? Do you keep like, what's the right path in that? And that's a tough, complicated thing to look at. And I agree that is kind of very similar to Ashley's relationship. But I mean, you've just said that Kenzie is Dexter, and the community is gonna just flip out.
Yeah. But then I said that I would defend my own serial killer children, which is probably a worse thing. So hopefully they pay more attention to that part.
I'm going to keep a close eye on your kids, man. Very close eye.
Don't worry. So now this group of ruffians shows up, and they are like basically a guided missile aimed at Breakthrough. And this is not a Chekhov's gun that will remain cocked for long, because it goes off in the same chapter. Yeah,
I really like how the text chooses to point them out, though. Wildbow once again uses Victoria's fashion sense to construct the war a little bit. Like, there's this hierarchy of prison uniforms where, like, everyone eventually gets a uniform, but everyone also comes in with their own clothes. They let them keep their own clothes. So, like, the people that have been there longer are wearing the uniform, but mixed in with scraps of the clothes they came in on. That's like a really wonderful world building detail of this prison that, of course, Victoria is the perfect person to immediately pick up on, because that's just what she does. I really love it.
Yeah. And it's just very atmospheric, right? Like, you can really, like, it's cinematic. Like, you can imagine this being a show, and like the look of these hardened people who've been in there for a while, and their ramshackle kind of post-apocalyptic looking half prison uniform, half scraps, literally scraps of clothing. It's great.
Yeah.
So Vista camps the Byron spawn at his mattress and gets him to sit down, and is immediately like, just for the sake of argument, if you were to start seeing a girl, what are the rules of engagement? And then the text says, I turned to look at Vista, my eyes widening. She ignored me. and I love this whole bit here. I'm so glad we get this. It's just Vista and Byron trying to find some happiness in this world, and also can't help but see it as like an intentional opposite to what happens in the next chapter.
Yeah, I did this thing where I was like reading through the chapters and formulating my part of the script this afternoon, and I picked up on that too. This idea how much this is like the better like the good version of everything terrible that happens in the next chapter.
Yeah.
And I was like, Matt, I discovered this thing. And then I like immediately read your script and was like, oh, well, so did you. Fine. No, but I think this is very important. We have Vista approach Byron here, set him aside for a conversation. She likes him. She wants to be with him in some way, but she respects him. She respects Tristan. She knows it's complex and she wants to try anyway, but she understands that there are rules. The first thing she asks about, like you said, the first thing she asks about in this conversation is, what are the rules? What are the boundaries? Establish the guidelines for me up front. And then she leaves the conversation with introspect on it, digest, see how you're feeling about it. Talk to Tristan, see how he feels about it. Tristan, you can talk to me if you want. If any of you have concerns or doubts, or if you want to let me down easy, just say it's too complicated or there's too much going on. I'll understand. And this is this idea of, throughout this whole thing, this idea and this desire from Vista of informed consent for every party involved in this whole thing. Nothing is going to happen here unless every single party in this is on board. And we're going to establish this ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And if it's a no-go, I walk away and we're good. This is how these things are supposed to work, right? Like this is the ideal that people should be striving for in their relationships, especially in relationships where people have complex baggage and different stipulations and rules and things that are not the standard relationship path. And it makes a fascinating contrast to everything terrible that happens in the next chapter. It's almost as if we're setting this up on purpose. We're saying, like, look, this is how it's supposed to work. In a healthy, balanced relationship where there's respect, this is how it's supposed to work. And I love it.
Yeah, right. It's this ultimate like instruction manual for how to have a mature interaction. And the thing is, it's also extremely charming and cute and adorable, and it makes you smile, which is great because, like, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a human tendency to think that if you have these explicit conversations, then it like sucks the romance out of the situation, and the fact is that it doesn't have to.
No,
and this scene shows that it doesn't have to, because it's, I mean, like it maybe even improves it, because Byron, I don't think, would have even been open to any kind of overture unless it were packaged within, like, look, this is gonna be, I'm gonna be extremely patient and we're going to talk to Tristan, and it's all going to be,
Yeah, and I mean, Vista is initiating the conversation. She's saying, I want to have a conversation. I want to talk about this. And then it goes forward naturally. And then when it's over, she leaves. Right. like that's important. Yeah. And I agree with you about the flirtiness is so great. The whole black knight, blue knight thing. I loved that.
Yeah.
I love how it ends. I love how he says, let me be a gentleman as a way of thanking you for being cool. I'm not good at this whole thing, but it kind of made my week. And her response is, it making your week makes my month. So there, take that. That's adorable. That's adorable. I love it. I love it so much.
Me too.
I really hope these guys find a way to work this thing out. I know it's complicated. I know it's not going to be easy. But if there's going to be hope, this is the path, right? And that's really encouraging, and it makes you happy. And seeing these characters that you care about happy is great. Especially, I agree. We need this. The rest of these chapters are going to be tough.
Yeah. I'm so glad
we need a little bit of this.
So glad Vista's not dead.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And you know, I only noticed this because I'm staring at this text, but Vista commits a little Tristan Byron faux pas, because she talks past Byron. She says, Tristan, you can talk to me if you want. Mm-hmm. And it's like, in this situation, she's obviously trying really hard to be sensitive, and it's like you just already know that the two brothers aren't going to hold this against her. Like, maybe they'll mention later, like, that's one thing that, like, we prefer you not do that, but like in this moment, it's like you can't be mad at her for that, right? So it's like it's all about kind of intention and where the heart is.
And maybe it's wishful thinking, but I'm imagining Tristan's point of view throughout this whole conversation. And unlike in his interlude, where his point of view at Byron's stumbling and foot and mouth nature about flirting, there was animosity there. Yeah. There was like, you stupid, you're so bad at this, you're terrible. This, to me, even as Byron is doing the same thing, even as he's stumbling, he's not doing too really good at flirting. He's a little bit awkward about this whole thing. In my mind, I just see Tristan as being more like, oh, Byron.
Right.
I just see the animosity not there. And maybe I'm just reading into that. And there's nothing textual that says that or not. It's just my feel of where the characters are right now. And I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my like, man, that's kind of a rabbit hole to go down, right? This idea that we do kind of like, as we're reading this scene, there's nothing about Tristan, but I'm totally having this little movie in my head off to the side of like what Tristan is thinking and how he's reacting. And I almost can't help it. I almost can't not do that. It's the same. It's the same way that like when I'm in a real life social situation and someone says something like off color, I'm like instantly aware of like the reactions of everyone else, even if I literally can't see them. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like you're always tracking and modeling these things, and you do the same thing when you're reading. You do the same thing for fictional characters. So like, yeah, I mean, we do have, every single reader does have their own little inner Tristan. And I agree with you. My inner Tristan was like happy this is happening and maybe even trying to think through like before he even has his turn, like, what am I gonna say to Byron, like that in terms of what the boundaries should be so that I can make this kind of work for him as well as I can tolerate. You know, we can meet in the middle somehow.
Yeah. And I just like, I imagine this moment where Byron says, I'm not good at this whole thing, but it kind of made my week. Byron's chivalrous moment. I imagine Tristan going, yeah. Like just going like, fuck yeah, you did it.
Yeah.
Good job, buddy. I don't know. I hope that's what's going on. And I hope Tristan's animosity is not returning. But I don't know.
No, I think it is. I mean, I feel pretty comfortable saying that, but then like the story can always prove me wrong. But I feel like I feel kind of like that's where we're going with the Capricorn brothers. But we'll see. I mean,
we will.
There's been tension recently, but that was all the teacher stuff. So we'll see.
And yeah, I mean, the cool thing about the book is we honestly don't know how much of that was just a performance and how much there is underlying truth under there.
True.
Yeah.
So yeah, he leaves. And then we get one of the little gold morning symbol page breaks. And that, you know, normally we would just ignore or just kind of move past it. But I just want to point out, like, Wild uses these a lot, actually. Mm-hmm. And they mean different things. So, like, here, it means page break or section break or whatever. It's a web serial, so there's no pages. But I kind of call them page breaks. I don't know. Denoting Victoria sleeps, the night passes, it's the next day. Sometimes, though, they mean Imp has used her power and wiped out some memory. Sometimes
it's a point of view shift.
Sometimes it's a point of view shift. Sometimes it's a massive change in a character's perspective as they enter or break out of a master effect. In the case of Goddess, so they don't like there's no code to crack in the sense of like, what do these mean? It's like, well, they mean something has changed. Yeah. Right. And so I'm just pointing out that so that when we get to,
for no apparent reason at all.
Yeah. Right.
No, I think that is important. And I think we'll see another one of them before the incident in question that you're talking about. So.
Yeah. All right. So the next day they're in the chow line and Theo explains how the prisoners actually like they want to be singled out for punishment because if they are punished, it can mean that their sentence is sort of used up in a sense, or like there's an allotted amount of getting their ass kicked, and then they just want to get it all out of the way so they can get out of prison faster.
Yeah. I like this because like we said, we started out this chapter in this kind of calm, collected, adorable, like they're in prison. Yes, it's a bad situation, but nothing bad has happened yet. And so we're having moments of like just not as stressful times. And then the tone shifts. We move from this adorable Vista Byron interaction. It's the morning now, and with the morning come problems. And I like how the end of the you were just talking about the section break. The end of the last section kind of sets us up for us. Like the lines are into the small hours of sunrise and the light of dawn on an alien Earth. And of course, we're talking once again about how we use light and the different meaning of light and sunrise. The sunrise brings the dawn on this alien Earth, and what that brings with it is problems.
Yeah.
Suddenly, our characters are in this room. It's crowded. Victoria describes it as it's dense enough that there wasn't a place to stand where we could extend our arms fully to each side. So like people are packed in there. It's crowded. And then we're told some of these people want to be punished, which not only reminds us that our characters are in the rehabilitation section of prison, not just the holding. And so we're seeing that a thing is probably going to happen to them at some point, but also we're starting to see just how warped the justice system actually is. And it's like, it's a really great way of easing you into, sorry guys, we're ramping up tension again. Like your calm, peaceful night is over. It's time for the day. It's time to get worried again.
Yeah. I like that. That's just kind of layering on the psychological kind of horror of what's going on in this prison. That's great.
Yeah. And I want to pause on this for a little bit here, because we see Rain kind of talk through their system, right? He says, the rebuilding is supposed to be according to strict rules and shit. Revise and uncover coping mechanisms, perspectives, toxic relationships. Really big focus on the rehabilitation part. I'm really not sure how I feel about it. The idea of going and within a year or 3 being done, being allowed to re-enter society, that sounds good enough that I could see myself looking past the brainwashing. And Ashley like immediately points out that like Rain saying he could look past the brainwashing is like a big deal, because like that's the source of everything that he's gone through before has been brainwashing in some form or fashion. And I really appreciate we're introduced to this system that I think seems pretty barbaric on the surface. Like when people are wanting to be brutalized and tortured, it comes off as like, holy shit, that's terrible. But through Rain, we're offered a perspective on maybe why a person would want this. Like why a person would look at this and say, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And it's not that I think the book is like saying the Shin justice system is the ideal system for punishment and rehabilitation. But I think it's important to give a perspective to kind of understand the people that are here, understand why people would be okay with this, and kind of maybe tangentially understand why people would go to Amy and be like, yes, fix my brain. Yes, make me not a criminal anymore.
Yeah, I like that. And also, I feel like different people can have a different definition of what brainwashing is, right? Like,
sure. Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I mean, you could call a lot of accepted institutions in our society brainwashing if you were cynically minded about them. Like, I guess maybe part of it is that I don't even actually see what aspect of this Rain is calling brainwashing. Like, to me, it seems a lot like what it seems no worse than what we already do, and we don't tend to call it brainwashing. But
well, I mean, I don't know how much of this is like Star Trek Next Generation 4 Lights-esque torture, right?
Right.
I think that's a pretty big part of the rehabilitation, I think, and I would call that brainwashing. I mean, I think that's the message of that episode of TNG is kind of like pushed enough, you'll start to believe it. Like that's the end of that episode is, for a minute there, I actually did see 5 lights. And that's like not good at all.
I know. Yeah, I think you're probably right. Like we haven't been explicit about what this torture, what these kind of struggle sessions actually look like. But yeah, that's probably where the meat of it is. I agree.
Yeah. And I mean, like it's a great way of, like I said, I think it does 2 things. I think it establishes the brutal nature of this world, but also if you establish something that brutal, I think you need to like at least Wildbow wants you to understand a little bit of the psychology of the people that would do that. And I think Rain is a great tool with that, because if Rain is a guy who wants to be better and he wants to do the time and to get better and then to go out there and do good. And that's what he wants. And you give him a path to that.
Yeah.
Maybe the path is worth 5 lights. I don't know.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it quite the way you're putting it, but I think you're exactly right. That's cool.
Yeah, and I just want to say I'm not saying that this is a good. What I'm not saying here is this is a good method of justice. I do not think it is, but I think it's important that we understand people.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't know if I have any, like if you put a gun in my head, I don't think I could tell you like what's the best what's the best way of doing a criminal justice system? Like, I don't know. That sounds like a really hard problem to me.
I would be very dubious of someone that offers an answer that's very simple to that question.
Yeah. Good point. So as we see them in the lunchroom, Vista and Tristan are hanging out. Seems positive. Seems good.
Yeah, it's really the only indication we get this week of the aftermath of their conversation. And I agree we're meant to see this as a positive sign. Like she said, Tristan, if you want to talk to me about and work through this, I'll do it. And then we see them talking. So I think it's important that it's Tristan here, right? Like Wildbow could have shown Byron and Vista talking here. And I think a message would have been conveyed there. It's like, oh, maybe they're working it out. But showing Tristan here, I think, is evident of the communication, the three-way communication is happening,
right?
And that's encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, I like that we're having this conversation today about this idea of like the stuff that the character moments that we're simulating in our head that are not actually on the page. Because I totally just when Victoria said like, yeah, Tristan and Byron swapped, which involves them going into like a private bathroom, basically. I was like, yeah, they probably had like a pretty short conversation there. Because when they can, like, basically when they can swap privately is the only time when they can have a conversation.
Yeah, that's true.
And we don't know what was said, but now we see that Tristan is happily hanging out with Vista, and that's all positive, and suggests that everyone is kind of on the same page, or at least trying to be on the same page.
Yeah. I don't think this means that, hey, it's going to work out.
Right.
Yay.
Right.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, that would be simplifying it, but I think there's goodwill on all parts here.
Yep, I agree. Okay, well, that's all the good things that happen.
We're done. We're done with that. We're about 40 minutes in, so the rest is just going to be pain. So the guards, along with a cohort of prisoners, the gang I think from earlier, converge on breakthrough. The team rushes to hide Kenzie's tech before it's discovered, and then they're roughly searched. Before they can do anything to prepare against the attack, they are assaulted. The woman from the previous night throws a ball tied to a wire and manages to shred off a good patch of skin from Victoria's hand.
I don't.
Yeah,
I don't do good with like that kind of gore. Like I watch scary movies all the time. I watch gory movies all the time. Like I feel like hand gore gets me.
Yeah,
it's like hands are important.
Yeah. So I was going to wait to read this chapter, and then I accidentally looked in the spoilers, the word spoilers channel of our Discord. It was a legitimate accident, and my eyes just saw the word degloved, and I was like, shit, I can't not read the chapter now.
Oh boy.
So this was last Tuesday.
That's great.
That's why I read the chapter last Tuesday. It's because I read the word degloved, and I was like, well, there's no positive way that word has been used ever. So
yeah, what I really appreciate about this is the second this happens, like everything changes, right? But in the back of your mind, and this might not even be conscious yet, in the back of your mind, you're like, Victoria's injured, Amy's here.
Yeah. And
I think that's in your head from this moment until Victoria opens her eyes and Amy is standing there. I think it almost becomes inevitable.
Yeah.
And I think Wildbow knows that. Like he knows that you're going to be thinking that, and he constructs this ramp up of tension to play off of that feeling that everyone's having.
Sure. I mean, I think that as soon as I saw the word degloved, literally completely out of context, I was like, oh shit, somebody's horribly maimed, and the implication is Amy is going to have to be involved somehow.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's the story has set up so well that is the stakes, right? The stakes is not the injury. The stakes is, oh shit, Amy's going to be involved.
Yeah, and it plays that as an inevitability at this point, and that ratchets up the horror.
Yeah.
I like this moment where she's about the lady throws the ball of wire at her, and it says, "I reached out to swat at the tiny lemon, ready to use my power, timing the wretch with the swat, and then reconsidered. Power use? Could I get away with it? I could. I would have, but my hesitation threw off my timing, and I was a hair too late. I love this moment because if you remember, it was a long time ago. Think back 4 weeks ago. Chapter 1 of this arc.
This same arc that we were still in, yeah.
The same arc that we're still in. Chapter 1 of this arc, Victoria is sparring with Annalise, and he is telling her that she needs to stop overthinking and trust her instincts a little more. Trust her instincts and react instead of thinking the situation through. And here we are, chapter 8, and Victoria doesn't instinctually react. She pauses and hesitates just a little bit. And it's enough. It's enough to hurt her. And I really like this. I like it's such a clever way of bringing that old conversation back to the fore in a way that doesn't have to be explicit.
Yeah. I adore it as well. I do wonder what exactly it's saying, because I've seen her kind of warrior monk thoughtfulness and caution as she wades into combat situations as being like a sign of her growing maturity. You know, it's certainly in contrast to Glory Girl. I guess maybe the answer is like, you know, Annalise wants to make her into someone who, I think he even says something like this, like, I do want you to do the right thing. I just want you to do it faster.
Yeah, right. Right.
Which again would be what, you know, she did have the right instinct. If she had gone, she says it here, if she'd gone with her instinct, she would have succeeded. Yeah.
I mean, and it's like, yeah, I mean, I think it all comes, I think it comes back down to trusting yourself to instinctually know what the right thing is. And Victoria has a lot of trouble doing that. That's why she goes through these things, because Victoria still sees the action she did as Glory Girl as part of her. And she's terrified that if she doesn't think through everything, that's her natural state and she's going to fall back to it. But Victoria's different now. She's changed. And I think part of that change is recognizing to trust that change in you a little bit and to trust that instinct in you a little bit. It is interesting, though, because there's almost a recreation of this moment with Amy where she's about to like react with her power to Amy touching her, and she pauses to think about what the result of using her power on Amy could be for the people of Gimel. And it causes her, just like here, to hesitate for just a fraction of a second too long. And that's how Amy is able to get a hand on her. Now, you know, individually, that's bad for Victoria. But it's hard for me to look at that and say she made the wrong choice there. Like,
yeah.
Because, I mean, I think as terrible as Amy is, and we'll get into it, just like killing her with the wretch in that moment, like, wouldn't have made Victoria feel better. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would have solved her immediate problem, which is good because her immediate problem is Amy doing awful, awful things to her. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I look at that moment as Annalise was right again. You should have acted more instinctually, you know. And I think that's the not necessarily cut and dry nature of this. Sometimes consideration is important. Sometimes instinct is needed.
One thing I've been thinking about with these two chapters and considering everything that happens in them is like, if it turns out that all of this is for nothing and Gimel doesn't get the supplies from Sheen, that says one thing. If it turns out that all of Victoria's sacrifices enable the relationship with Sheen to be repaired and save millions of people, that says another thing. And it's interesting how it's almost like the story withholds judgment on almost the morality of her choices until we see the consequence. I don't know if I'm thinking about that right, but
I don't know if morality is the right word, but I get what you mean. Like, they are, I mean, throughout the entire chapter and a half now, everyone in this group, it's constantly making a choice to value this potential arrangement for the sake of Gimel over their own personal safety and security. Like, they make that decision constantly, again and again and again. Victoria makes it again and again and again. And yeah, I mean, I think the end result, I don't think it changes the meaning for it in the moment, but I think it does reflect on thematically what that's saying.
What the story is saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, because I agree. I'm kind of uncomfortable saying like whether this was a good choice or not depends on what some third party decides. I don't think that's true, actually. Like I'm inclined to say this was a good choice, even if it results in horrible consequences, because it was true to her like heroic nature. But it could still result in even worse consequences, and it could be like, oh, it was actually for nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty cool fight overall. Because so the next thing that happens, Vista, I think, tries to redirect the second projectile, which saves Victoria from maybe being decapitated, but doesn't save her hand from even worse damage.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like the text says the wire is like curving around to hit her, and that suddenly goes straight instead and hits a guard, and that's when it kind of cuts up a guard a little bit. And I think Victoria describes that as some fucky stuff.
Yeah.
Which is like kind of what we use for power wonkiness. So I definitely think you're right that that's Vista doing some stuff.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I love about this fight is that you've got all these strong capes, and most of them don't use their powers at all. A couple of them use their powers in the quietest of ways, as March might put it. In ways where they're in this dense melee and no one even notices that the powers are being used, and then like Theo, he grabs the wire on purpose and he cuts himself with it, and then he uses his power to basically cut the woman who's holding the wire using his fingernails, using his like hand projection power, but in the most subtle and unnoticeable way. So like you've got this tense fight where the heroes are surrounded. And they're having to defend themselves from grievous harm without using their powers too overtly. But like the stakes are real. Like these people really want blood.
Yeah.
Everybody's injured. Sveta, Tristan, Rain, the whole mob, not just the gang that's attacking them specifically, turns against them. The guards are turned against them. It's brutal.
Yeah, and I like that it kind of it's brutal and it gets confusing in a way that we don't normally see. Like Victoria even says, I wasn't sure what happened next as I tried to throw it down so I could step on it. There's talk about the wire and make it reeling it in hard. It could have been the wretch reaching out with another hand and tugging. It could have been the way she had the wires arranged for easy deployment, but it cut her. And so like Victoria, who I think is pretty good at keeping track of what's going on, especially when it comes to her use of the wretch, is so like disoriented in this moment that she's not even sure exactly what happened here. But of course, in classic Victoria sense, she does take a moment here to like go back to some Carol-esque strategy, where she starts thinking about goals, like. And she has this wonderful monologue that I think is really important that I don't know if I want to read the whole thing. I'll do it. I'll just read the whole thing.
Okay.
What had I said back to Ashley? What had I said to Ashley back on the train? Every little bit mattered. Every ally made, every reinforcement of positive expectations. It counted towards a greater something. Here, that something wasn't in play. Here, a small, powerful group led by a small, powerful person had frittered away any and all currency that they had with the public, turning to force instead. Every time a parahuman pulled a gun because it was easier, or crossed lines, or went after families, or threw away all pretense of showmanship to go hard at the efficient, rational route, they were edging us collectively towards this. I love that. This is we've been talking about this parahuman versus human conflict on Gimel for the whole story, the whole book. This has kind of been in the background, and it's come to the front a couple times, most recently earlier in this arc. And then our characters go to Shin, and Shin is the end of that road, right? Shin is what's going to happen on Gimel unless the two sides can get a handle on things and learn to coexist.
Yeah.
It's every little, like, none of it matters. The currency, everything that is important to Victoria in her relationships with other people is immaterial. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's institutionalized hate and fear of parahumans at the highest level, where basically you can score points by doing absolutely ridiculous things like just arresting these people. But there wasn't even a pretext for arresting them. They were just like, you're here and you're parahumans.
Yeah,
so arresting you.
And it's pretty heavily implied that these gang members, I mean, they're with the guards, that this is a setup, right?
Yeah,
that this is a test to see how they're going to react powers wise. And yeah, I mean, it's the end of that road. It's the end of the Gary Nieves road. Nieves road.
Yeah. So fight continues. Vista owns a dude, takes a shiv, and cuts herself. Basically, she's the total badass of the fight, as usual. The heroes have been shouting this whole time that they defeated Goddess, and it seems like maybe it's made some difference that they've been saying this, or maybe the mob has sated its bloodlust, but then we see that it probably has more to do with Amy looking down on them that actually broke up the fight.
Yeah. So we're going to have a whole lot to say about Amy next chapter, Matt. And there's going to be a lot of difficult conversations that we have to have. But I think what I want to point out here is something pretty significant here, because there's the things that Amy is saying and the context in which those things are being presented to us, the reader. Amy is coming here to save them, quote unquote, right? She's here. She says, I'm gonna testify that you didn't hurt them. I'm here to make sure things are okay. But look at how this is framed. She's above them. She's elevated. She's looking down on them. The text describes it as, look, she spoke down to us from her perch on the wall. She spoke down to us. That's very specific language. The entire room is silenced by her presence. Everyone's looking at her, not just them. Like, this isn't just Victoria freaking out because Amy is here now. The entire room reacts to her presence. Notice how she's not surprised about Victoria's injury. Notice how she says she's supposed to be looking out for them, making sure there's no trouble, she says, and yet there was just trouble. She's a little late.
Yeah. I mean, the image one gets is of like a bird of prey, like perched up on a high perch, like waiting for, like a vulture seeing blood and showing up to take advantage of, like, oh, injuries?
Yeah, Victoria's injured now?
You need help.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need help.
It's time. You need me now, huh? Let's, yes.
Right.
Succeed.
And I mean, like, you could even push it farther and say, like, really? She just happens to be here when the attack happens? Or was she before?
I think there is some not exactly like maybe kind of conspiracy theory-esque reads that could like composite Amy as being the person responsible for this whole thing, right? That she constructed this whole scenario. I don't know about that. It's tough to trust what Amy's saying, so it's tough to know that for sure. But I do think that the framing of this matters. Like the tone of this shifts. Her entrance into this room changes everything.
Yeah.
And it is not just because we're in Victoria's head.
Yeah.
That's important. That's very important, and it's going to be very important next chapter as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we're seeing that this is the way this world reacts to her as well.
Yeah.
So Victoria throws up a little bit as Amy offers to help with her injuries, and then Victoria proceeds to ignore her completely.
She throws up bile.
Yeah.
And then she spits it out while Amy's talking. It's great. It's like, it's a really good touch. Like, I you don't know if like Victoria's consciously doing it. She's like, mid-sentence, Victoria's talking, I'm going to spit this out because I fucking hate you and don't care at all what you have to say. But it's really great. Like, I think one thing that we should mention now is that she's holding on to her ripped flesh.
Yeah.
She's holding it in her hand, and there's one fingernail. Wildbow telegraphs this from the beginning, right? We say explicitly 2 fingernails were ripped off. She picks up her flesh. 1 fingernail is left. This is one of those things that like at the time comes as just a moment of just kind of selling how serious the injury is. It's like she's lost 2 fingernails, and like, oh my God, she picks up this wad of skin, and there's only 1 fingernail on it. But it is what it is doing is laying seeds in your mind, right? Because this is going to pay off in a fun way, and I say a fun way narratively, a horrifying way,
satisfying.
Yes, narratively satisfying way. I need to be very careful with my words today, but I think this laying the seeds for this now makes the payoff so much better than just saying at the end of next chapter, just saying, when I lost my hand, it had my skin only had 1 nail, and now it has 2.
Yeah.
Like setting that up from the beginning and making it like a natural extension of that is just a better way of doing it.
Yeah, I agree. It's very clever because it's an injury that at the time it's just like, oh, that's fucking horrific.
Yeah.
But then you realize like, oh, it's horrific in a way where there's I mean, we haven't got to that scene yet, but I think in this context it's appropriate to bring up. It reminded me of the Breaking Bad scene with the plate. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
where
I do.
There's a broken plate, and there's a missing piece from the reassembled plate. I kind of don't want to spoil it because it's such a good scene. But basically, the implication is like the whole thing hinges on there's a missing piece, there's a missing thing, and it changes the whole tenor of everything surrounding it.
Yep. Love it.
Yeah. So Amy does drop the info that the wardens are battling some new crisis right now before she leaves.
It's never a dull day for the wardens.
Yep.
I keep seeing all these posts about how the wardens are incompetent or not doing anything, and it's just like, nah, man, they're just out there doing their thing, and we don't get a window into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, these chapters also kind of explain why some of them are staying away, right?
Right, and staying away doesn't mean not doing anything.
Right,
it just means not doing anything there.
I mean, we know that Valkyrie saved like a couple of worlds in her interlude.
Yeah,
maybe 3. I don't know. I don't remember.
Just a few. Just all a day's work. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So this chapter ends with them walking towards what they're hoping is the medical area to get treated for their wounds, right? And there's this wonderful moment in here that I wanted to point out because it's like this hero moment where they're all heading out. Everyone's injured. Some of us supporting others. Sveta held the bridge of Kenzie's nose. Theo leaned on me. Rain leaned on Ashley, limping. Our priorities were to get help for Tristan and Theo, or Theo at the very least, if we could manufacture a situation to swap Tristan out. And then Vicky gives them an out. She says, "We do this for Gimel. If anyone isn't comfortable pushing forward with this, if you're scared or if you need out, we could..." God, I hated saying it. "Ask for some strings to be pulled, favors to be called in." Even with my offer, nobody seemed especially intent on escaping or going. They knew the importance of getting these supplies for Gimel, even if it meant enduring a gauntlet. So this is a moment that our team has just been attacked. They're hurting, they're limping, they're supporting each other. They're in a group, and it's like, this is it. We can get out of this right now. We can do it. There is an emergency button. There is in case of emergency, break glass escape button we can press. Let us know. Uh-huh. And nobody stands up. Nobody says no. Nobody says, yeah, I want that. Everyone says, no, it's more important. The thing we're dealing with, the thing we're fighting for is more important. And like, it's just some fucking heroes, man. Like we just need to, we need to give our characters credit when they're struggling through stuff. Some of our characters backslide and have difficult days and are trying hard to get better. But at the end of the day, like, this is a hero moment.
Yeah. And it's breakthrough plus 2 of our favorite characters from Worm, right?
So exactly.
These are all just great people. And I think maybe that's another thing where we're like, as we lead these people into the subsequent chapter, it's like these people are the last people in the world who deserve this kind of treatment and the things that are going to happen to them.
Yeah.
So 14.9, the team wanders through the building looking for medical attention, not really getting any directions or help at all from anyone. I think one thing I was surprised at this point was how few people know the goddess language, as they call it. But I think that Goddess wasn't actually in charge for all that long, so it didn't really have that much time to kind of percolate through.
Yeah, but also, do you think Goddess is the type of person who is going to be like, I decree everyone shall learn English, or does she just not give a fuck? Like, her power doesn't require them understanding her language, right? It's just like, you want to do things for me now.
Yeah, I mean, also, I don't think she cared if the populace knew her language. She only really cared about. She only really directly controlled the parahumans.
Yeah.
And the parahumans, maybe the parahumans are more likely to know English, but they're not running into any parahumans here. So it
strikes me as a very Goddess thing to just not give a shit about that at all.
Right. But isn't that even like an extra layer of, like, if you put yourself in the perspective of these Sheen people, like, we don't know a ton about them, but like, imagine not only have you been taken over by a superpowered tyrant, but the tyrant doesn't even speak your language.
Yeah, and doesn't care to.
It doesn't care. Yeah.
No, yeah, it is. It's a nice extra fuck you towards Goddess for sure.
Yeah.
I really love this opening bit of this chapter. Victoria returns back to her labyrinth imagery as they walk through the prison, and her typical way of very much connecting back to Amy. She says, "This is Amy's world we're in." This is Amy's world. We get that beat recurs over and over again. This Shin is Amy's. And so it's fitting that the breadcrumbs we're using to walk through this maze is the blood of the people that are wounded. I think it's Tristan. That's the one actually dripping. But they're like dripping blood as they're wandering through these hallways trying to find the medical aid, and that is being used as the breadcrumbs or the ball of yarn to lead them through it. I think that's it's great imagery, and it's one of the things I really love about Victoria.
Yeah, I adore the concept of it. Definitely, Wildbow's having a lot of fun with labyrinth and imagery in this story.
Yeah. So there's one. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say in general, right? Like, this isn't the first labyrinth. I don't think it's gonna be the last one.
No, definitely not. There is this moment that I wanted to talk to you about here because it got my brain turning a little bit, maybe too much. But there's this moment here where Kenzie's nose is bleeding. And Ashley has tilted Kenzie's head back to help stop the blood from dripping everywhere. And this really jumped out at me because last chapter we talked about this moment where Ashley basically says, whatever path Kenzie needs to take to get better, I'm going to support her doing it. Even if that means blackmailing parents. If that's what's necessary, cool, I'm for it. And I kind of like the way Victoria and Ashley deal with the nosebleed as a pretty good, symbolic microcosm of that general philosophy. Because, the tilting of your head back, works to stop you from dripping blood everywhere, right? But it's not a good long-term solution to a bleeding nose because you'll send blood into your stomach and probably throw up, and it'll be gross and bad for you. Victoria's way is lean forward and hold the blood, and it'll be better for you overall. Ashley's way is just let's stop the bleeding, and it'll be okay. But maybe there will be a further consequence of that we can't see yet. And I don't know. This might be me grasping too much. This might not be important or intended or anything at all. That was a really nice little example of the difference between how they approach Kenzie in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a tendency when you love and care about someone, you don't want to see them suffering, and that can unfortunately manifest in a way where it really underlines you don't want to see them suffering. Right. Where Ashley is, as far as she knows, helping, but not actually helping, and then I think once I think it's worth pointing out that once Victoria says hey, that's not the way to do that, Ashley doesn't, have a comeback for her. Ashley doesn't do her normal, her what you think of as her Ashley, well, I'm going to find a way to be right somehow, despite the fact that I'm wrong. She just says nothing.
Yeah.
She doesn't even really seem to react to it.
Although, she doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, part of that is, I think, the fact that Victoria is not really describing a lot of extra details right now. And I think that's just where she is. Her whole ways that she's narrating is very terse and clipped, and the way the injuries described are she's basically the way she's doing her narration, I feel like she's either in shock or going into shock.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The language is we'll have a paragraph that just says frick, fuck, motherfuck. And then the next paragraph, 3 very short sentences. I worried about Theo. I worried about Tristan. Both had been slashed. Yeah. Repetitive short sentences, and not describing a lot of the kind of detail that Victoria normally would.
Yeah, I mean, it turns out getting the skin ripped off your hand, it hurts pretty bad. So I do agree that it's a combination of her going in shock from the injury and this looming presence of Amy in the building that is kind of rearing its head over everything, that is really causing her lens of view to shorten, to focus, to go only to necessary, not going to ruminate on things very long, focusing on what needs to be done, how we do it, go. It's not will not be the philosophical Victoria.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Wildbow sells this in another way too, not just this language. There's this moment here where, and we'll get to the talking about the scars in a bit, but where they're talking about keeping scars, and Victoria's like, oh, there was someone else that did that. It was Cricket. And I think it's Vista who's like, Victoria, not cool. And she's like, oh yeah, I forgot that Theo was associated with those guys. And she says to him, I don't see you as part of that group, which is, that's a really nice moment because it's like, look how far Theo's come. He's amazing. Yeah. But I also think like Victoria, the Cape nerd, under other circumstances, probably wouldn't have forgotten that connection. Probably wouldn't have fumbled on that interaction. Yeah. And I think this is a good way of showing the reader a part of her that we're not used to seeing, and therefore it gives us a good grasp of how bad she's doing right now.
It gives us a grasp of in what poor shape she's in, and it also sets us up for the fact that she's maybe not 100% paying attention to all of the things that she should be paying attention to, and thus gets into the situation she's about to get into without, seeing the red flags.
Yep.
Before we get there, though, I adored Theo's casual surface level. I'm pretty sure it's one more scar added to 100.
Yeah, he does have a lot of scars. Think of all the scars he got just from the Jack Slash battle alone.
Right. Which he chose to keep, of course.
Yeah, of course.
That's the situation. Yeah. So, yeah.
No, I want to talk about that though.
Yeah.
I think that's important. Let's talk about the keeping of the scars.
Sure.
Last week, we specifically had Amy mention Victoria's scar, right? Like she's sitting in the shower, she's got her arm up on the thing, and she's got her scar from the millipede guy. I forget his name.
It was actually like centipede in Japanese, I think is what I forget. Mukade.
There you go. Yeah. Thank you. Awful, terrible, horrible, cerebral power, really bad scar. So we're having this this recurring thing with scars. And then we have this time, Theo says he's chosen to keep his scars. Vista echoes basically the same thing. She says, yeah, I collect scars too. And I think this has a potential to work in a lot of ways here. Like, it of course connects to Victoria's scar like we just met, but also connects to Victoria's choice to keep the memory of the 2 years of the wretch, right? She, like Theo, chose to keep his scars as a remembrance of this time. Victoria looked at Amy and said, do not take those memories away. I want to keep them. And I think this of course connects us to Amy, who we're bowling ahead into this confrontation that's going to be horrifying. But it could also be some like clever, like direct payoff setup in a little bit. Like, we've now firmly established that, hey, Theo chose to keep his scars. Theo likes his scars. He wants his scars. If Theo shows up tomorrow without any scars anymore, something's going on there. Especially if he's like, no, yeah, I wanted them gone. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think the same thing with Vista. Like, so, I think this is great because it connects emotionally and metaphorically to what our character is going through. But I think it also has a chance to pay off in a really cool way that can once again illustrate the severity of what Amy's doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's really interesting because your mind does go on all these tangents, right? Like, you're definitely, while you're reading, thinking about all the implications. Because Wild was reminding you of these things on purpose, right? Like, sure. we didn't need to have a conversation about scars as they walk through the building, try to find the medical center. This is a choice to have a conversation about scars and the importance of keeping scars to keep track of your mistakes. Like, that's why he's doing this.
Yep.
And yeah, so you definitely think about, okay, why is he doing this? What are and usually more than one reason, because those are very, very efficient and clever in how he does things.
Yep.
So
I love it. I love seeing that stuff and going, I see you.
Yep.
I see you, scars.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I like this language. Would I turn a corner and find myself face to face with the bull-headed denizen of this labyrinth that kept turning up, kept looming above me? It's great. I just love the fun with language there. Yeah,
even in Victoria's shock and almost panicking state, she still has time for some excellent wordplay. Yep. And I love it. Yeah. The bull-headed denizen of this labyrinth. Perfect.
I almost missed that. In fact, I may have missed that the first time.
I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah. They end up meeting Citrine and her husband.
Isn't it funny that she still doesn't know that's Number Man?
It's great. Part of me wants there to be like a great moment when she realizes it, and part of me just wants her to never realize it.
Yeah, I love it.
So they meet them almost accidentally. Like, Victoria almost like literally stumbles into the meeting with them. as she's kind of losing patience. And I mean, I think that's one kind of telling moment where she like barges through a door and Sveta's like, what, where are you going? And it's just kind of like Vicky's acting relatively erratically by her standards.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's a really rough moment because she's in the middle of this bursting through this door. She's imagining this moment, this very specific Amy moment that we've never had her brain connect to before, which is Amy with gore up to her elbows. My gore, me. This is like, these are things, and this ends up paying off in an interesting way later in this chapter. But this is a moment where like the gore of which she's holding in her hand right now is connecting specifically back to the creation of the wretch moments that have mysteriously vanished from her memory, that she can't remember at all. And I think so. Yeah, she's like you can imagine her just like barreling through this door, like barely even looking where she's going because she's just being assaulted in her head by these memories.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't make that exact connection, but that's I think you're right. So they have this conversation with Citrine. Citrine tells them that she'll have them out soon. Gimel and the wardens are applying pressure, and it shouldn't be more than 12 hours. She actually seems kind of upset about the state of how they're doing. I like that. It's pretty minor, but like Citrine is a very cold person, but she's not completely inhuman. You can buy her being like upset that like, you know, what she might see as her people have been so mistreated.
Yeah.
And, you know, even though she's the kind of person who cuts off somebody's eyelids for wronging her, these are her people, damn it.
Yeah.
And I also love
selective empathy. It's
exactly.
Really great.
Yeah. I also love it when she and Tristan exchange information in Spanish to go over the guards' heads. That was really clever.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. I mean, I like this whole moment. Yeah, there's even calling in Citrine was a complicated decision for Victoria that she wasn't thrilled with. But you know, she is not the best person. But yeah, I mean, this is great, and I love like this moment. Citrine tells them 12 hours. You have to wait 12 hours, and you're like, well, shit, that's a long time. But I think there's a part of you. I don't know if it was true for you, but there's a part of me that's like, I know this inevitable Amy thing is happening. It's coming. It's gonna come. Like, and then she busts through this door, and Citrine is there, and you're like, oh my god, maybe we're safe now. Maybe we've gotten out of it. Like Citrine's here now. There's a powerful authority figure here now. Maybe we've dodged this bullet. And of course we haven't. Yeah. But it's almost like we release tension just a little bit here, and then like double it almost. And I think that's a really great touch.
Absolutely. You have to, I mean, that's just good storytelling, good drama, right? Is to offer the character a possible out, or to show the reader what could have been a possible out, and then be like, nope.
Yeah. And of course it's worth saying that Citrine gives Victoria an out right here, right? She says, we can make this faster. If it would damage the relationship, it would hurt things. But if you are scared, if you need attention now, we can pull you out now. And of course, Victoria once again is like, no, like I'll be okay. I'm willing to risk myself for the good of other people. And it's heroic, but it's heroic in like the most tragic way. Because as you said, like she shouldn't have to be the person that has to make that choice, right? You shouldn't. It's so unfair to put a person in a position where they have to choose between letting 2 million people die or being confronted with the person that violated you to your core. Like that's so unfair. It's not fair at all. But it's a choice that Victoria is going to make every time because that's the person she is, and it's heroic. But it's heroic in the most tragic way possible.
Yeah, we're gonna have to invent some more words like we tend to do.
Yeah.
If only there was some kind of word that exemplified like the concept of a tragic hero.
I don't think
I've never heard of it before though.
Yeah.
So Tristan, Sveta, and Theo leave with Victoria, leaving behind the others to finish the conversation with Citrine.
Yeah. One thing that I really loved about this chapter as a whole in this moment is setting up that feeling of strength in numbers, right? We ended the last chapter with the team is all together. They're all leaning on each other. They're all supporting each other. We're scared. We're hurt. but we're in defense formation. We're together. And then Wildbow forces the group to separate. Like we run into Citrine. We're like, yay, we're saved. No, actually, not only are you not saved, but your group has just dropped down to 4. Now there are only 4 of you. And you feel that increased vulnerability. Like as they walk out the door, Citrine is mid-sentence talking to someone else. I think it's talking to Vista, I think it is.
I don't know.
And they walk off, and then there's a moment where it says, the door closed behind us as we stepped into the hall. And it's just this like help has just closed the door, and now you're weaker. Now there are 4 of you instead of 8 of you or 7. I don't remember that number.
Yeah.
And then they go back into the labyrinth, and then when they eventually get led to the medical wing, they're separated again because they're put in individual rooms, and like each one of the injured people is put in their own individual room, and Sveta is outside all the rooms, and you're just like, oh God, the group of 4 has just gone down to 1 now. And that's when you're like, this is it. This is happening.
Yeah.
And it's such a great, you can feel as the numbers dwindle down that ratchet attention, that inevitability of this moment. Mm-hmm. And I think like writing wise, it's so fantastic. Like I remember just this first time I read this chapter, like squirming in my chair because like I knew this was coming, and I knew every word I read got me closer to this moment, and there was no stopping it. But I couldn't stop reading, but I just didn't. I didn't want it to happen. And I think that's the exact feeling that the text is going for here.
Yeah, I think so. I appreciated from a writing perspective the way it manages to capture kind of the state of mind you go into when you're injured. Like even if you have the kind of injury that's maybe going to require stitches or a brace or something like semi-serious, maybe you don't need an ambulance, but it's bad enough that you're like, oh God, my body is falling apart. I'm freaking out. Like, that's kind of the mentality. That's kind of the like headspace that Victoria goes into here, which it's interesting because she's been injured worse than this actually. I think, but like this seems like, well, that was a cape fight before, and now this is just like, well, now you're just injured. You're in this place where no one's here to help you. And you're scared and isolated, and it's more like a normal human reaction to being injured.
Yeah. Well, and there's no one to punch.
Yeah.
Like there's no way to fight your way out of the situation. You're hurt, and you can't just beat the guy that hurt you and win. Like that's actually the wrong thing to do. And so yeah, it is a different kind of injury. I think you're right.
Yeah. So they meet first I have written in my notes, I don't want to write this part.
Yeah. Fun fact, Matt did all the prep work for a chapter and a half Sunday night. I think you did it Sunday night for the first chapter and a half. And then I don't think you did the rest of it until this morning. I think you put off as far as you could. And I don't blame you for that.
Some of it this afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's just like, you're just like, oh, I just don't want to it's taxing.
It is. And I mean, it's supposed to be. This is complicated emotional stuff.
Yeah. So they reach the medical wing, and they're all separated for medical care. Victoria tries to stop a doctor from sedating her with a syringe, and then a guard comes in and actually argues at some length with the doctor. And you have to wonder what the significance of this long conversation is, because it the text makes a point of saying that it goes back and forth. And there's clearly an actual argument here. Is the doctor just trying to knock Vicky out and hand her over to Amy, and the guard is actually advocating on her behalf, or is it the
vice
opposite?
versa? Yeah.
This seems like there's a lot going on here, though.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And then I think it's also worth noting that, like at a writing level, that Victoria is not mentally present enough to pay attention to what could be going on here. We kind of talked about this before.
Yeah.
But I feel like a fully cognizant Victoria would have noticed some of these red flags. But her narration continues to be very quiet, reactive rather than analytical, descriptive of what's happening at a relatively basic level of the who, what, where of the scene. And eventually the guard doses her with these mysterious granules, which knock her out.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right there, and that's the awful part about it, because of course what we see next is that the first thing Victoria does is blame herself for this, for letting her guard down, for not seeing these red flags. Like there's just a moment when he gives her the thing, she says, "Is this for just my hand?" And his response is, "Your hand, yes." And that's like, one of those like half truth things where it's like he didn't. Yeah, it'll numb your hand for sure. And
right.
I think it's interesting. Like you kind of pose this idea, like how much of this is Amy, like are either of these people acting on orders from Amy? And that's the one thing that we're the big unknown in this situation is how much Amy is actually in control of everything. She has made it seem, and the rest of this whole interaction has made it seem that the Shin non-capes are in control, and she is basically forced to do what they're telling her to do. And that's the narrative she's built. But it's Amy. That's a very Amy narrative, right? This like, it's not my fault. I have to do these things because they're forcing me to do them. Like I have to be in the shower while you guys are changing because they told me to do that. That's the narrative she's created around this stuff. And so yeah, is it someone acting on orders from Amy to knock her out? Is it just
I mean, it could.
Is it just the doctor doesn't give a shit?
Yeah.
And he just like the standard procedure is to knock people out.
Yeah.
And he has no way of knowing like the full depth of Victoria's fear against this particular thing to happen.
Like, I mean, he could misunderstand and think that her objection is to needles, right? Just be like, oh, she doesn't like needles. Fine, I'll use the granules instead, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a pretty innocuous, like, interpretation, right? So, yeah. And the text intentionally has this conversation happen in another language. It doesn't really give us any real, like, runway for speculation other than, like, well, we don't know what they're saying. So could be Amy, right?
Yeah,
so, yeah.
All right, so here we go. Mm-hmm. Before we get into this really obviously complex emotional stuff, I just wanted to take a minute to thank a few of the members of this community that we've spoken to over the past few days. We've had some people reach out to us and offer their insight and their aid in how to approach this very, very difficult emotional topic. I'm going to respect those people's privacy, but you guys know who you are, and we wanted to thank you for this. Mm-hmm. This community can be such an incredible, positive community that is around this wonderful book. And I think the way to ensure that it remains that is that we pay attention to each other's needs and treat things like this with the care that it deserves. So that's what we're going to really try to do throughout this whole section. Yeah. Recognize the difficulty and the emotion that is attached to the things that are happening here, and how these affect people, real people that are enjoying this community and enjoying this work with us. So let's do that, and let's go into it.
All right. So yeah, when Victoria wakes up, Amy is here. She's smiling. It's the first thing that we are made aware of. And Victoria is paralyzed, can't move. And first she feels a colossal rage, something that's basically likened to like the sum of everything that she's felt up to this point in the story. And then almost immediately this is replaced with terror as she realizes there's nothing she can do. She's frozen. And in her Victoria analytical way, she's aware of being completely overwhelmed by this terror.
Yeah. And I mean, once again, we look at this book, and what we have to do as we're analyzing this book is look at the choices and look at what we think the choices are conveying, not just the textual ones, but the subtextual ones. We open this break on a smiling Amy. Victoria is going through one of the worst experiences of her life. The text, everything I felt in the last 2 years, every swear word I'd uttered, multiplied by every jawbone and sternum, every rib I'd shattered, the lives I've taken, and the damage I've done. I trembled with it, and it couldn't find an outlet. I would have to puke again. I would have puked again. I would have screamed at her, and I couldn't. So this is the emotion that Victoria is feeling in this moment. And to contrast that, Amy is smiling. Mm. Amy is happy. This is exactly what Amy wanted. This is the exact situation that Amy was hoping she would be in, and she's happy about it. And how do books convey things? That is an example. Mm-hmm. There is no read of this thing in which Amy's smiling in this moment is meant to convey, oh, good. Amy's happy. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, right. I mean, it's again, I find myself talking about how things are cinematic, and maybe that's just the way I read, and that's its own thing to talk about. But like the fact that like I almost involuntarily and without thinking about it visualize this with like that film effect where it's like an aperture opens as the character's eyes open, and the first thing you see from their point of view is the smiling face of the monster looming over them.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a horror moment.
It is. Yeah. There is no other explanation for it. It is a person waking to find their worst nightmare sitting in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so as you know, she's lying there and Amy's kind of approaching. I reached for powers and found paralysis instead. They were there, but I thought of the Gimel refugees, of the need for supplies. Between paralysis and the stray thought, reaching for my powers and finding them was slower than Amy was in reaching out to touch me. Yeah, and there's that other beat that we talked about earlier in the show, right? Where Victoria is, you know, right now currently revisiting every single moment of horror in the last 2 years and paralyzed, but she still sees an outlet through her power. She still says, I can reach for my power and it will be there and it will help me. And she hesitates just long enough, just for a fraction of a second. And she does, that hesitation is for the sake of others. And like we talk about heroes, man. And like, look, like this is her nightmare. This is her nightmare manifest. And her brain still stops for a fraction of a second that moment to jump out to someone else's need first. Yeah. And and when I say Victoria, trust your instincts, when Annalise says Victoria, trust your instincts, I think that's what we're talking about here, because that was instinctual. That was an instinctual reaction. You can trust your instincts. You are not Glory Girl anymore. You are not that person. Yeah, right. I mean, that hesitation may have saved millions of people, right? Millions of people, yeah. And she would have spared herself from what I think is literally recreating a trauma. Like this isn't even like, oh, this is scary to her. Like this is actually this is fresh trauma. This is a fresh new trauma. And yeah, I mean, like just to reemphasize, like I think on the show maybe, or I'm not even sure if I've said it on the show, but I think I've definitely said it in the Discord. Like I think Amy's just dumb. And the fact that Amy touches her and uses her power on her again here graduates Amy from being dumb to being monstrous. Yeah. For me. Like, and the thing is, maybe I'm slow, right? Like Matt, if you didn't get that by now, you're not paying attention. I would say, I think maybe a lot of people are in the same place as me, where this was a moment of like, oh shit, she's actually going to just do it. She's actually going to just like, she just wants to use her power on Victoria. She does not give a shit about what Victoria said this whole time. You can't tell any narrative where, like, you can't tell any narrative about Amy where it's like she just doesn't understand, because she does understand. She understands. She does it anyway. Yeah, I mean, we had fun last week. I had fun ranting about how stupid Amy was. And she still is stupid. Yeah. But that's not all she is. You're absolutely right. And this is a moment that, you know, I don't know if I would have guessed that this is what was going to happen. Like, and a lot of it, I think, is like, you want to believe the best in people sometimes. You want to believe that a person who did a horrible thing years ago has gotten better, has improved. Especially when they're saying it, right? Like, you want to believe people sometimes. And I think I fell into that trap a little bit. I wanted to believe she was in a better place. I wanted to believe she had been making progress and working towards her. And I wanted to believe that she was a person that was not capable of doing this again. Yeah. And that's just not true. Yeah, right. And I mean, it's complicated, because I think it says a lot about our instincts toward not just fictional characters, but also real people. We like you just said, we want to believe the best of them. We want to believe that, we want to spin their crimes and their misdeeds into, oh, that was a mistake. Oh, that was wrapped up in extenuating circumstances. Oh, you need to consider the context of it. And she just goes for it. She just does the worst possible thing that she's been told is a huge violation. And it's like there's no for me, this moment is the moment where it's like there's no wrapping paper you can put on this that makes it anything other than just the clear sign of I don't know. I lack a sufficiently strong word to condemn Amy for this.
Yeah.
So
I think monster is fair.
Yeah, monstrous. So Amy flinches away after a good solid 2 seconds of contact. And then Victoria passes into unconsciousness, marked with 5 of those little gold morning page break, line break symbols. So yeah, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
So like the first thing I want to say about the page break, the line break thing is that it's just a neat little story thing, a neat little storytelling thing, because even if I was binging Ward and not really sparing the time to think about like why choices were being made, why writing choices were being made, it would be incredibly obvious that this is a climactic story moment because of this like visual decoration. This is something we've been building up to basically the whole story, and it deserves to be marked out in all its horror in some kind of standout way. And I think this is a clever way of visually marking it.
Yeah, I agree.
But of course, beyond the fact that it is cool and clever, I think that we and other people in the fandom suspect that it signifies more than just like, a moment.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that jumped to me the earliest was this idea that it's kind of like when Wildbow messes with the page, right? Where with the Vista part, where the page warps and lengthens, so the text is literally being manipulated by the things that are happening within it. So along that same line, you see 5 dots. You think maybe time has passed between each of these, but it was removed, ergo deleted. And then you start to think, okay, well, you see the conversation that Victoria's trying to have, and your brain goes, okay, maybe she was deleting. She tried to have a conversation. It didn't go well, fucked up, got rid of that. Tried again. And now we're here. And that seems to me, that's the thing that jumped out as the most obvious and likely possibility. I'm not saying it is definitely the possibility, but it would be a clever way of demonstrating that.
Yeah.
In like, well, why is there no text here? Well, there was. It got deleted.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot of clever and interesting theories, and I'll be shocked if nothing happened, right? Like if it turns out like, oh no, it was literally just a visual cue of oh, that was a big deal. Like Amy did something. That's like I would bet money on Amy did something. I don't think I'd bet money on any particular she was, save scumming is the
right.
the term.
And I mean, like for me, like my brain process when a theory jumps to mind, like right away, my brain goes, nah, that can't be it. So I immediately start like looking for other things. And I did have trouble like thinking of what else this could be. I mean, I really do like just your general idea of a signifier of significance, of the horror and magnitude of which this break in the text is doing, is signified by, no, we're not doing just 1 page break this time. We're doing 5 page breaks.
Yeah. So Victoria wakes up again after who knows how long, after who knows what has happened. And her first thing that happens is she feels like she's betrayed herself by letting her guard down, which is just really a crushing moment. And it's really terrible. And it reinforces her PTSD that she's been struggling with this whole time, because like the fact, like her problem, her constant fear and anxiety is rooted in this idea that she never feels safe. She never feels like she can let her guard down. She sees Amy lurking in the shadows. And now she feels like, oh, that's reinforced. I let my guard down and it happened again. Now I need to be double vigilant. I mean, that's horrible. That's so bad. This is so bad for her.
Yeah, and I don't want to be coy with it, because this is coded language. Like Wildbow is using this reaction with a lot of intent. the first to feel guilt for being violated by another person is a thing that people experience in real life all the time. They feel guilty. This is my fault. I did this. I should have made better choices. I betrayed myself. I let my guard down. These are things that people actually feel, and it's wrong. It's wrong. But this is how your brain works sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think this is all very intentional to get us into this mindset of she has just been violated by this person, and she is reacting to that violation in a way that we understand, that we're using language, we're relating this specifically to things to make it clear to people the severity of what is happening here. And like, it's horrifying. It's tragic. Like I think you're exactly right. Like, you know, you think back to the first chapter with the conversation with Annalise, where there was this moment where she was able to imagine being with someone. She was able to imagine a future, and she wasn't there yet. She was not there yet. It was hard to get there, but a brief moment of success where she's able to imagine this thing. Gone now. There's no way she just is able to slip back into that easily after she gets out of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm as mad at Amy as I've ever been at any fictional character right now.
It's disgusting.
It's horrible. Yeah. So, and you know, she wakes up from this. She's feeling all of this. The text is very good about putting us into this horrible headspace that she's in.
Yeah.
And Amy is still in the room with her in this what feels like a pretty small room to me. And Victoria is clearly deeply upset, but she's upset in a way that leaves her notably numb and non-aggressive.
Yeah.
Like instead of like immediately murdering Amy, like the first thing she does, she asks about her team. Amy tells her that they're back with the prison population and they don't know that Amy is with her, and they've been calmed down and reassured. So I think part of that is the text, you know, checking off that tick box so that we're not wondering, so that we can focus on the scene. But also, obviously, part of it is that's what Victoria would say in that situation. You know, it kind of answers the question of like, why has the team not already broken into this room?
Yeah, I mean, I think this whole conversation is littered with these little moments where you're supposed to be like, that kind of sounds like bullshit.
Right.
Being told that Sveta in particular just went back to Gen Pop and just left Victoria alone, not knowing that Amy was there, but that Amy was out and about, certainly doesn't sound like something Sveta would do. But hey, Amy has a very convincing story about how, hey, there was almost an incident, but then my dad showed up, and then your team huddled together, and they decided in their huddle to prioritize the people of Gimel over their own concerns and needs. This, of course, is a very effective excuse to use on Victoria, who herself has been using that idea constantly over the last two chapters. Like it is almost targeted to make Victoria go like, yeah, I get that, because that's exactly the type of person Victoria is. Your team met together and they decided Gimel was more important than your safety, and Victoria is like, yeah, I agree, I would have done that too. In fact, I did that. And it sounds like it could be true, but you kind of get the feeling that there's maybe some half truth here.
Well, I think a big part of that is that Amy's just so full of shit lately. Like every interaction Victoria's had with her in this arc, Amy has done this thing where she kind of changes her story as it goes on, and it always gets worse as it goes on.
Yeah.
And at this point, you just don't trust her. Like,
oh yeah.
And so I think that's a big part of why it seems like everything she's saying is bullshit. I mean, also I detect in her like a real attribute of liars that I am well familiar with in real life, which is that they overtell the story. Like if you ask like, why didn't I fill the car up with gas on the way home? And I'm like, oh, I forgot. Then you believe me. And if I'm like, oh, you know what? I ran over a raccoon and I was just so distracted by it that it just really threw me off. And I just drove all the way home, and you'll be like, okay, why are you throwing in all this detail, man?
Yeah, I think you're right.
kind of starting to. So like I don't know. That's like she kind of over explains things in a way that makes me just extra suspicious of her.
Yeah.
But that's just me maybe.
I like that.
So Victoria, feeling hollowed, harrowed, and wrung out, calms herself by thinking that she can use the cot she's lying on to kill Amy and the guard.
Hey, at this point, whatever you need to get through the situation, if inflicting terrible violence and immediately murdering their people is what gets you mentally through the situation, go for it.
Yeah.
I love this moment where she states that like she does feel hollow, and she says that feeling of hollowness scares her. I love that little detail because it's like it's not only that she's feeling these things, that she's feeling hollowed out, but like feeling that feeling brings more feeling of terrible things. Like, and I think that reflects the fact that she doesn't know what's been done to her right now. She's sitting here and has no idea what's been done to her, and she's terrified, and everything is wrapped around that fear. Even feeling hollow is wrapped around that terror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. But, she still doesn't do anything. She just continues this conversation. And Amy has started talking about the supplies that Sheen is giving. Amy then suggests that they talk, but Victoria calls it for what it is, a forced interaction on Amy's own terms, with Victoria being cornered. Amy then begins to gripe about how she never gets to make her own decisions, and she just wants all the good stuff that she's done to be taken into account.
Oh my God. So I think the part I love about once again, let's say when I narratively satisfying.
Yeah. Effective.
When Amy says, "You're making me do this. It's certainly not optional." And Amy's responsive is, "If I say it's an option, you'll say no." And that's Amy. That is Amy, right? Yeah. I want this thing. I don't care if you want this thing or not. I don't care.
Yeah.
My needs, my desire, what I want to do and what I need outweighs anything you have to say, anything you want, anything you feel is necessary. And it ties into this idea that she's like really channeled in her head that like, all I need is one good conversation. All I need is one fair and even opportunity to talk this stuff out and set the record straight, and everything will be okay. And therefore, whatever I need to do to get that opportunity is perfectly acceptable. And that's wrong. That's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. It reflects back to the time where she thought it was a good idea to like use Goddess to try to get in touch with Breakthrough, which turned out to be just an incredibly bad idea. Yeah. And now she's kind of, it's like even worse, if anything, here.
And this part where Amy whines about her upbringing to Victoria. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows Carol's a shitty mom. Like Victoria knows she was there. Like she this part where she's like, maybe it would be nice if you realized I've kind of been under someone else's thumb or in someone else's shadow or following someone else's directions every step of the way. And when I did finally do things my own free will, I was unpracticed and traumatized, and that excuses it. No. Yet no. She almost says yes. She almost says yes. She believes it does.
Yeah.
She believes it does. On some level, she believes it excuses it.
Right.
And I was thinking about this. Like, what Carol did to Amy is terrible. Like, she didn't love her. She wasn't comfortable with the whole situation. She was a shitty mom. She was a shitty mom to the daughter she did love. She was a really shitty mom to the daughter she didn't love. But look at how these two daughters frame this. And I was talking to you about this earlier. Victoria resents Carol for how she raised her and what she did to her. Absolutely. Does Victoria blame Carol for Glory Girl's actions? Does Victoria say, I was too rough with people and it's my mom's fault? It's not my fault. I was under someone else's thumb.
I don't think so. And I think like the closest she'll come is she'll draw specific lessons back to Carol. But I think we've remarked specifically on the fact that she thinks that Carol was a great Cape mentor, but a bad mom. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and even if part of her anger and part of her the reason why she was taking her frustration out on these people came from her mother, Victoria has taken responsibility for that clearly. She like even if Carol is to blame for some of the stuff, and yeah, I think she kind of is. It doesn't matter. Like you did it, Victoria. You threw a dumpster at that guy. That's your fault. You did that. Amy, yeah. Your mom was shitty to you. Yeah, people told you what to do. And I love Victoria's response is like, you were a kid. Like, yeah, I'm sorry. You were a child and your parents told you what to do. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Right. You had a bedtime? Oh no, that justifies everything.
Yeah. And it's so important to look at, we've talked so much about change and recovery, and we have a whole question about change. We got some really wonderful answers to our discussion question last week. We'll get to that. Even if there are extenuating circumstances for why you became the person that did those things, you still did the things.
Yeah.
And you don't get to sit there and say, no, you should at least take into account the things I've did. It's like, well, that's great to understand who you are as a person. It doesn't make what you did okay.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean I have to like feel but any differently than I feel as the victim of your deeds, right?
Right.
I think that this story is brilliant. One of the things that it's done is it's given us this vocabulary of how people deal with having done bad things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Rain is this example where Victoria legitimately thought that what he did was horrifying and disgusting. But Rain has never, for a moment, even in his own internal monologue, been like, you know what? I just wish that people would take into account the extenuating circumstances of the fact that I was in a cult and brainwashed.
Yeah.
He internalizes everything and he takes responsibility for everything.
Yeah.
Even the stuff where other people are like, there's some, you were given orders. You were in a cult. No, he takes responsibility for it, and that's like one end of this. Maybe it's a spectrum. Maybe it's kind of more of a multidimensional thing. But
yeah, well, and I think that's a really good point, because I think some of the early versions of Rain we see in that room arguing with Cradle and Love Lost. That's what he's doing. Mm-hmm. He's saying, I was brainwashed. It wasn't my fault. Like, don't you understand? Don't you understand? It wasn't like and his growth as a human being, his growth and his change as a person has been to get away from that person and to become that person you just described, that person who takes responsibility for all of it. No matter, it doesn't matter where it came from, that he did it. And yeah, that's not where Amy is. Amy is as far away from that place as possible.
Well, I think there's this really interesting idea about the specific concept of guilt and the emotion of guilt, because Rain is that way for a while. And then eventually we see him actually go through the process of saying it's not getting any better.
Yeah.
And the guilt is eating away at him. And that's what actually pushes him to the point of being like, look, I need to take stock and make some changes and take responsibility, because this thing where I blame everything else outside of me is not working. And then on the opposite end, we have somebody like Cradle who doesn't have remorse. And I think that maybe Amy is somebody who doesn't have remorse, who just legitimately doesn't feel bad at all about what she's done.
I think Amy feels guilt, but I think Amy's solution for assuaging that guilt is not fix myself. It's fix the other person. And I mean, that ties in very nicely with her power, right? Because Amy can't fix herself, right? Like her power does not work on herself, supposedly. Her power only works on others. So this drive to solve my problems by fixing you, regardless of whether you want it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm on the fence as to whether Amy has ever felt anything like genuine guilt. I think that she's maybe driven more by other people's perceptions of her in a narcissistic fashion than she is by guilt that actually originates inside her. Like she's frustrated that Victoria won't see her correctly, right? She's not.
Yeah, I'm not the person who did that.
Yeah,
and you can't see that, and so I need to talk to you to make you see that.
Yeah. I mean, and plus, I don't feel like at any point she expresses what I would call genuine remorse. So,
well, yeah, I mean, there's a quote I pulled later, and I want to get to it. Just the way she frames some of this stuff.
Yeah, sure. Let's think,
move on because we got a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so like she said, like, I think that the moment where she almost says yes was like a trigger for you. The moment.
Oh yeah.
The moment that was a microcosm of everything for me was when she says, "I can't help you feeling cornered. You can leave. Leave me alone. That's all I've asked for." About the third thing, she said, stubbornly plowing ahead. What I did, I can explain. Fuck off, Amy.
Right.
Fuck right off.
Like the text, Wildbow is making it as explicit as possible. Leave. Just leave.
I can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
Just leave.
You can. Just do that. I can't help you feeling cornered. You're standing in front of me in the room. You're literally cornering me. Just go.
Yeah.
And she just stubbornly plowing right ahead.
Yeah.
She
has to control it. She has to control everything.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's horrible. I hate it. I love it. I hate it. And then Amy tells her, "Okay, I did use my power for a second, despite your repeated clear statements that you did not want it. But all I did was I sensed your physical state, and then I understood that you actually feel these feelings that you've said that you feel many times. And then I flinched away, knocking you unconscious. So that's all that happened. It was fine, as you can see from my explanation."
Yeah, which is bullshit. Well, like, the thing I love about it is Wildbow doesn't directly come out and say this is bullshit, but Amy latches on to this idea of pulling her hand off a hot stove, so much so that she repeats it twice within a sentence from each other. That's what happened. So she touched her. It was like she was burned. She touched her, felt the emotion, pulled off. But look at how the text actually describes the touch. The touch lasted all of 2 seconds. Then, belated, she pulled her hand away, and my consciousness went in the other direction. Now, why would we put the word belated in there?
Right.
Unless we were trying to specifically say, like, the word belated and the phrase pulled back like I had just touched a hot stove. Don't go to it, Kevin.
Yeah, I've never held my hand on a hot stove for a 2 count, a 2 Mississippi.
You would be so burned.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, and they're like, it's almost like a justifiable half truth, because if you weren't quite paying attention, you could maybe buy that lie, right? That she did just touch her and then pull back, and she pulled back, and she, like, it's just the detail of it. And just like you said, like the hot stove thing is like you ran over a raccoon, right? Mm-hmm. It's like adding additional detail to this lie that isn't necessary.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's that thing that Victoria has already pegged her as, like, oh, she finds a thing and then she keeps coming back to it.
Yep.
And that's what this is, I think. Yeah. So Amy tells her, "I only want an hour of your time and then your team can leave." And Victoria tells her what she wants. She lays out her secret plan, which is try to fix Hunter, get some counseling, and then submit to being put in the Phantom Zone if that doesn't work. Were
you surprised by her just decision to kind of reveal the plan here?
Yeah. This is one of those things that makes me wonder if there's something else, if Amy didn't make her a little bit, like, suggestible or whatever.
That's where my brain went. I was just like, I definitely on the first read, I was like, man, it just there's a line here that could have a delicious Wildbow double meaning, where she's like, I shouldn't reveal too much. I couldn't hold my tongue.
Yeah.
And it's like that on initial read, that could be like, I just felt the need, like I had to go. But on a second read, when more is revealed, it could literally just be like, I was physically incapable of stopping revealing this.
I do think it's ambiguous in the sense that it could just be that she's in this terrible, horrible state of mind where she's less in control of herself than usual. Yeah. But definitely tip more toward some kind of, I don't know if compulsion is the right word, but some kind of tweaking.
On my second read, I was a little more inclined to the second interpretation. Mm-hmm. But I mean, like, the thing is, like, there's so many possibilities here because like we just have no idea what she's done.
Yeah.
Like by the end of this chapter, we know she was lying about one thing specifically. And so it opens up the world of lies, that everything she says has to be doubted and everything she's not saying has to be called into question.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So there is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a thing that I want to zoom in on here that I find is interesting. What Amy's doing here. So she's saying when Victoria is explaining her hate, why she hates her, she says it feels like the hate and that kind of idea you're talking about is coming from the side of you that scared me when we patrolled together. When you hurt an ABB child abductor so badly you had to call me to fix him. This is the second time in this conversation that Amy has brought up their past in context of Victoria would go too far and I would come in and make it right. Mm-hmm. And I think this is really interesting because I think this gives you a key into what she's doing. Like ways in which she's subtly like trying to remind Victoria of how much I did for you, how much you needed me. Like, look at what I did for you here. Remember when you had me and when you would go too far, when you would be that person that would go too far, I was here to help you. And it's just like this really like diabolically terrible like attempt at manipulation. And it might not even be conscious. It might just be like, I think, especially because of this, that there is a part of Amy that sees that as the holy grail. That team, Glory Girl and Panacea is what I want to get back to. And this conversation is going to help me fix things. And then we're going to get back to that team. Look how good we were together. This desire to go back to that time, I think is pretty core to Amy. And I think this kind of reveals that in both a manipulative way and just like a revealing of like a part of her that she doesn't say kind of way.
That's interesting. I think I also read into it this idea where it's almost a barb. It's almost like, well, you're no angel.
Right.
You've done all this terrible. In fact, maybe you've done worse stuff than me, Glory Girl.
Yeah.
You know, and reminding her that she's not. She shouldn't be so high and mighty. Maybe is how she might phrase it.
Yeah, and I like the reason I kind of liked my interpretation because I think it ties in nicely to this idea of stuck in the past versus moving on that we've been talking about throughout this entire book. And then you see Amy as a person who maybe looks at that time and is like, if only I could get back to that.
Yeah. And
it's not possible. It's just not.
Yeah. Yeah. Victoria does drop some information and some perspectives that I don't think we've seen framed in this way. So basically she asserts that before she made the wretch, Amy, quote, took all the parts of me you liked and mashed it all together into a big pile of lovey-dovey Vicky you could cuddle with, kiss, use. And this is like, I mean, again, this is one of those things where I'm like, maybe I'm dense or willfully ignorant, but I think this is kind of a new and much worse piece of information. And also, I think you went back and you kind of showed me how this all actually comports perfectly well with Amy's rundown of what happened in that hotel room from Carol's interlude in Worm. It's just that, of course, Amy told the story in a very Amy fashion where it wasn't explicit and made her seem like it wasn't her fault.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, myself included, had not fully mapped out the extent to which what happened in that room happened. And this is, I think, bringing absolute clarity to that. And so let's be clear as we bring clarity to this. The text here is confirming what happened here. During the days in which Amy was trying to heal and then subsequently wretchified Victoria, she was using her in incredibly inappropriate ways. The book does not explicitly go further than those hugs and kisses and comfort, but it doesn't need to. It's drawn the implication and it's allowed you to go to the logical end of that conclusion.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to say that. And I'm glad it did. I'm glad it didn't.
Well, I mean, and I think even if it is hugs and kisses and comfort, and doesn't involve any other physical aspects, that's still a completely violating and deeply traumatizing thing to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Especially given that Victoria in this moment has still been mind controlled into being in love with her.
Right.
Which it's horrifying. Yeah. And yeah, like let's be honest here. Like this was said in Worm. It was. It is in there. Go read Carol's interlude. If you have not gone and read Carol's interlude recently, go read Carol's interlude again. Amy says as much in that. And yeah, I mean, I will fully admit to not drawing the completeness of that picture enough in my mind. But the book has now, in the sequel, has now done it for us if there was some ambiguity to it before, it is not ambiguous anymore. This happened and it's terrible and it's basically happening again.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, I think it's like you've said a couple of times, almost worse that we don't know what Amy has done just now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Victoria has remembered this, which apparently Amy had blocked out this incident, and Victoria has now routed around the memory, and Amy is upset, I guess, to find that now Victoria remembers it. Like, what's funny, or not funny, but gross, is that she's not like remorseful. She's like, you remembered, right? Like it's a really kind of gross moment where she's not sad it happened. She's sad Victoria remembers it, right?
Yeah. You got around she just casually drops out those memory blocks, which like the first time I read this, I was like, what memory blocks?
Right.
And then you kind of slowly remember that throughout this book, Victoria has every time she's searched for memories of that moment, they haven't really come. And like, I think when I was reading those moments, it was like, it's just because like she's mentally blocked them herself because she doesn't want to deal with that stuff. And we learned to know it was a literal memory block put in there by someone else. So when Victoria said, no, keep my memories, restore my memories, Amy followed her to the letter of what she said, which is, I want to remember the 2 years I was the wretch. She was fully happy to keep the memories of what she did to her hidden. And I think the implication here, I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but the implication here is that whatever weird stuff was going on with Engel's emotional power, like, triggered sense memory in her, and that the specific sense memory type things routed around the blocked memories. Like smells, and like the way you smell, the way smell is tied to your memory is a very interesting thing in a different kind of way than just normal like memory recall is. Right. So I think just what Engel does, the feelings that she gives to people is a specific thing that like reroutes your brain a little bit.
And it's a power, and we know, and like powers, can do wonky things. So for all we know, like her power directly taps into Victoria's brain and finds memories that it wants to use, and maybe those are memories that were blocked off, but now there's a power that is making them accessible. So I like that. I did not make that connection at all, that Engel was involved, but when we reflect on the way Victoria was reacting to Engel's presence, it definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that was, if we look back at the moment where suddenly, like she specifically says, suddenly she's recalling things that she hadn't thought about. And it's like, whoa, suddenly I'm back to this moment. And it's just, it like bowls her over a little bit because she's not expecting that. And it's because thanks, Amy. Thanks for doing that for me. It was really nice. Just do terrible things to me, and then if you erase my memory of them, they never happened, right? That's how that works. Ugh.
Yeah, I like your comparison to smell, though, because it's a kind of involuntary memory in the Proustian sense of the word.
Yeah.
So Victoria eventually, or did you want to?
Yeah, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this, the victim speech, for a little bit, because we're getting near the end of the conversation, and Amy basically says, "You are a victim, Victoria. I'm not denying that. What happened was horrible and unconscionable, and it eats me up inside. But I'm a victim too. The Slaughterhouse 9 came after me. I lost my family. I lost you. What happened wounded both of us and impacted the both of us in a massive way." So, first of all, you don't get to tell your victim that you're a victim. Like that's not... Fuck you. Second of all, look at how she phrases this. What happened was horrible and unconscionable. Not what I did was horrible and unconscionable. What happened wounded both of us. Not what I did. I lost my family. I lost you. No, you didn't lose. You didn't lose Victoria. You destroyed Victoria. this is worded in such a passive, non-responsible way. Like, it eats me up inside. I think, like, I want to believe there's some guilt in Amy somewhere, but I think you're right that this phrase, it eats me up inside, I just don't buy it. I don't buy that you really feel guilty for a thing you can't even admit that you did.
Yeah. No, I hate this. Right. Yeah. This is so consistent. Like,
yeah,
it's so realistic in its complete self-justification and inability to consider. I mean, this is just more evidence, I think, that she doesn't really feel bad about it in terms like inwardly. She feels bad that Victoria's mad at her.
Yeah.
She doesn't feel remorseful. She doesn't feel regret. Yeah. And she certainly hasn't changed.
No, yeah. Don't you understand? This is hard on me too. Right. What I did to you? Fuck you. Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh. And again, I think this is coded language. I think these are things that people in real life argue when they abuse people.
Yeah.
This is hard on me too. This is hard on me too. Like, yeah, I went to jail and I lost you. That's hard on me. I was like, no, you went to jail because you did a terrible thing. Like, duh.
No. Right. Well, I think that every person, when they make a mistake, there's an impulse in the moment to blame things outside of yourself for why you made that mistake. The difference between this is a blanket statement, not one that I would normally make, but I don't know any smarter way of saying this right now. The difference between a good person and a bad person is whether after that initial moment of blaming the child for dropping the ice cream on the ground for why you yelled, you say, well, that was shitty. I shouldn't have yelled at the child. They're a child. They're going to drop ice cream. It's my fault. I feel bad. I'm going to try to do better and not yell at the child for things that children do. And then you change.
Right.
A bad person just says, fucking child.
Yeah.
You're not getting any more ice cream ever.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it is true that Amy is a victim, right? Like, what the Slaughterhouse Nine did to her is terrible. The thing she had to do, like, the person her father was, the coldness with which Carol raised her, these are terrible things. Absolutely. Unquestionably terrible. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't, you don't get to hold that up as a shield to protect you from consequences of your actions. And that's what she wants to do. You shouldn't be mad at me, Victoria. You should be friends with me, Victoria. You should forgive me because the Slaughterhouse Nine fucked with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Ugh.
Gross. Ugh. So eventually Victoria tells her that she'll give her 15 minutes, not the hour she's asking for. And then Amy starts with a little bit of an info dump designed to appeal to the Cape nerd in Victoria. And we happen to know that Amy's pretty spot on with her Cape stuff because we have the privileged information of being readers.
Yeah, we get a little bit more color to what we kind of already knew, like this idea that the city is a lake and the lake is breaking, if you will. And the more powerful capes, the heavier they are, so they can't stay on the ice because the ice will break. So that's why Valkyrie's away. So yeah, it's just enough in line with what we've understood to make it so this is like the one thing that Amy is saying that I believe unquestionably throughout all this thing. This is the one thing that I take her at full face value with. I do think it's like it's so sneaky that this is what she goes with, right? It's like, I'm going to start with the Cape nerd stuff. Like it's almost like saying, look, this is why you need me. Yeah. Like, cause look at, I'm going to appeal to the exact part of you I know will appreciate this.
Right.
And it's manipulative.
Yeah. It's super manipulative, like, I mean, part of this is that she knows Vicky, and part of it is maybe like when she did her little mind spelunking, she was like looking for ways that she could just appeal to her.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
yeah, there is this moment where she says, I'll start with something I know will get your attention. Appeal to the side of you that loves Cape stuff. Or loved. I don't know if you've changed. I think that's so, like, it's so fascinating to me, the I don't know if you've changed bit. Because, like, in Amy's narrative, all she cares about is making sure Victoria is okay. All she cares about is making sure Victoria is healthiest, the best person she could be. And it's bullshit. Like, I'm not saying this is true at all, but in her head, that's what it is. And it's like, she doesn't know her really. Like this, like, I don't know if you've changed. Like, I think you still like cape stuff. I don't know. And I think to me, this was like a disconnect between like Victoria has changed. She's done work. She's put in work over the course of this book. And like Amy pretends like she's keeping tabs on her, pretends like she's seriously concerned with who she is and what's going on there. And so doesn't know if she's changed. The other interpretation of this is it's like a dig, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, you've left me so out in the cold, I don't even know if you like cape stuff anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like another way of like turning a knife a little bit.
Good point.
I hate it.
You're right. Yeah.
I hate it.
And the chapter ends with Victoria saying she needs a break. Amy leaves the room and Victoria looks at her injuries, and then she finds that there's a fingernail that can't be accounted for.
Yeah, it's a wonderful payoff to that beat we talked about earlier. Like, this was set up subtly from the beginning. And when you think about the kind of horrible insanity with which this situation was created, because like Victoria's hand is hurting. There are sutures in it. It was sutured together, right? Mm-hmm. But the fingernail's back. Right. So in order to build this lie, the extent with which Amy had to manufacture this scenario is horrifying.
Yeah.
Because like she definitely grew stuff back with her power, but then also like faked a surgery to make it convincing.
Yeah. Right.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Right. It's the kind of thing where you like Amy seems like a bad liar in her conversation, and then stuff like this makes you think like, is there like another level to her lies where she wants her bad lies to be caught so she can get away with her worst lies? I don't know. Yeah. It's very disturbing. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I think it kind of takes like, once you, like you said, like the stupidness, the dumbness, like this isn't the actions of a stupid person. This is the actions of a calculating, scheming person.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. That's the end of 14.9. I hope everything gets better now.
Yeah. I hope you guys are okay. That was a rough emotional chapter for everyone, I think. And,
yeah. Right. I mean, I don't know, just to get meta for a second, I think you and I are like way more like mad in this conversation than we usually are. Like usually there's kind of a fun to it, and I'm just like, man, fuck Amy. The whole amount possible.
Like we like to have fun on the show. We do, but there's some moments that you're just pissed off. You're just pissed off, and you don't want to have fun.
Yeah.
You don't want to tell stupid jokes. You just want to yell at Amy.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, let's do some discussion question, because that's always legitimately fun for me.
Yeah. I think this will be maybe a little more upbeat.
Yeah.
A little bit.
So the question that we stumbled our way through last week was, Kinsey says that Chris will not change. Do you think this is true? Compare Chris's lack of change with another character's successful change. So the first answer was from Megafire in a Megafire-sized post saying, basically ruminating on Chris. Megafire zones in on the fact that Chris seems to specifically target Ashley and Kinsey during these chapters, reminding us that in his own interlude, he said that he almost kind of respected Ashley. And here's a version of Ashley that has so clearly changed for the better. His reaction to that is to attack. He doesn't. He can't believe that she's changed for the better to that extent, and he wants to believe she's faking it, lying even to herself about it. Because if she could do it, he might have been able to as well, and that would mean he made the wrong call in coming to Sheen, and Chris doesn't want to think of himself as having been wrong. As for Kinsey, Megafire points out that Kinsey might not be the one that brings out the best in him. Sorry, might be the best. Might be the one that brings out the best in him, and he's therefore desperate to scare her off. As a nice reversal of the way Kinsey's relationships tended to go before. Even some of his jokes, like a compliment from you is like herpes from a hooker, Kens. It's a given. Are just more biting rehashes of jokes that he's made earlier. And then they pull out this quote. Getting an I like it from Kinsey is like getting a participation medal from a school event. Everyone gets one. And yeah, I like that. I mean, I think that's right. He's just he's lashing out specifically, in fact, more at the people who he actually likes.
Yeah. I really liked Megafire pointing out that joke thing, because it's just like he just rehashed a joke he already get, and it's like, Chris, you can't even do better jokes. It's just a cruder version of the one you already made. Come on, dude.
He's just being cruder and meaner with it.
Yeah. All right, Dancing Anatolia says that I think Kenzie's speech actually might inspire Chris to change his life up. He thought he was doing everything right, and no one ever challenged him because he's the biggest asshole he knows. So when Kenzie roasted his toast off, using cruelness and insight in equal measure, it might have actually gotten through to Chris by virtue of speaking down to his level. He might actually listen to people if they stop using hippy-dippy comfort zone creating therapy talk. Joking aside, I do think that says something interesting about like how not all methods of therapy work the same on all people. Like some are more receptible to certain things than others. And I think it is true that maybe Jessica's method was not the best for Chris. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely seems like the kind of person who's going to use sarcasm as a shield, and there's no better way around sarcasm than being super shitty.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
EXE JPEG, when his movie viewer compares Chris's current state with each member of Breakthrough. They say Rain stuck it out with the team despite it being the hardest for him, yet Chris bails at the first opportunity. Ashley routinely goes against her darker inclinations, and Chris seems to be fully indulging them. Tristan and Byron have better reconciled their relationship between themselves and others, and Chris actively antagonizes pretty much everyone he knows. Sveta's physical transformation is far more realized than Chris's current mishmash form. I could go on, but I think the point is pretty clear. Chris isn't redeemable, but he clearly is the worst case scenario of everyone in Breakthrough. That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I remember from the seating chart thing, this idea that everyone has things in common with each other, but Chris is actually one who has kind of the most overlap with everyone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the ways in which, I like the ways in which he is specifically failing.
Yeah.
Map to the ways in which everyone else is succeeding. I think
like
that's really great.
Love it.
Kausubalu V2 says, I think that Ward is a story about recovery from trauma. I agree. It shows that it's not an easy thing, that the path is full of pitfalls and backtracking and barriers to being okay, but also that, eventually, with enough perseverance of support and blood and tears, you can make real progress and get a little bit better. We see this through Breakthrough as a whole, and in Chris and Amy, we see what it looks like when someone doesn't try to recover, improve, and painfully take another step forward. Chris is someone with a whole lot of trauma. He has parent/clone issues, he has terrible body image issues, and he definitely has some sort of emotional issues. He has not handled them well. Chris has responded to his issues by self-medicating with a literal cocktail of drugs, and by deliberately alienating himself from the people who most cared about him. He has surrounded himself by enablers by going to Shin, and has made himself miserable as a consequence of his self-destructive behavior. By comparison, the members of Breakthrough have actively sought out support structures, imperfect though they may be. Each one has confronted their trauma with the help of people around them, and each one seems to be better for it. Have they completely recovered? Absolutely not. But they are trying to be better, and to some extent have even managed with one another's support.
Yeah.
It's a good, overall, Chris rumination. I like that.
Yeah, and kind of, I like it because it's kind of a circumspect look at where everyone is and how far they've come. I like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Simi Urge says, I think Chris is falling into the pattern of the villains we've seen in Ward so far, and that they are the fail states, for lack of a better term, in getting better, and that the fail state he in particular presents is central to the plot. What I see as the thread between all these villains is a choice. Do I want to get better, or do I want to survive? And what has made them villains is that they choose survival. As we see so viscerally demonstrated in Chris's interlude, he is someone who's driven by the urge to survive. He rebels against Lab Rat's indoctrination to survive as himself. He mutates himself to evolve into a more powerful form. He defects to Amy to be on the side of the powerful and to have experimental opportunities to improve his tech. Yet, he's also someone who's chosen, at risk to himself, to help others. That's the synthesis of Ward that I think Wildbow is building to through the character of Chris. Do I want to survive or do I want to get better is a false dichotomy. We survive and we get better through each other. Love it.
Love that. Love that. Especially that last line. I really liked that a whole lot.
Right, yeah, because it's the false dichotomy that these villains are trapped in out of fear.
Yeah.
And that does lead them to worse and worse choices.
Yeah. Really great.
Yeah.
Well answered. Bisexual Punch Party says, change requires 1, acknowledgement that something is wrong, 2, a willingness to change, and 3, putting in the work. Chris recognizes that he's unhappy with who he is, but his focus has been on tinkering the right chemical solution to physically change his body. He's too lazy and immature to put in the effort it would take to change who he is as a person. Even worse off is Amy, who won't even admit to herself how badly she keeps fucking up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
Beard of Valor says one of the ways we talk about change is a delta. This might come up in math or hard science. Delta T. How much did the temperature change? Delta V. What was the change in velocity? Chris is obsessed with putting distance between himself and what Lab Rat wanted him to be. He sees that as a distance measured from humanity. He wants to become something else, but he's been running from, not running to. Yeah.
I figured you'd like that because it's math.
Yeah, it's got some math to it. Yeah, and I guess that's the thing about that. The thing about expressing it that way is you can always make that number bigger. So how do you know when you're done?
Yeah, that's true. Toast Ghost 18 chooses to compare Chris with Sveta. Chris wants to abandon his humanity and embrace monstrosity to fix what he sees is wrong with himself, and he has the means to do it. He may have to go through some less than sparkly moral choices to do it with the experimentation on both himself and the Shin clones, but he'll do it to get where he wants to go. Sveta, on the other hand, was a monster who desperately wanted to return to the humanity she can only barely remember, once again serving as a mirror to Chris wanting to escape the past he is haunted with memories of. However, she was not a tinker or a changer, or knew of any way to resolve her humanity monstrosity conundrum. So she resolved to work on herself the best way she can, mentally and emotionally. Chris wanted to change his outside to fix his inside, and that was his focus. Sveta, on the other hand, knew that resolving that issue was impossible, so she worked to fix the inside, not the out. She found ways to improve her life, not to wallow in some perfect concept that may either be unachievable or even toxic to her mental state. Yes, eventually something came about that let Sveta resolve the outside too, but I think one can almost view that as an extension of her progress on the internal front. I like that inside versus outside comparison a whole lot. Yeah, I think that's right, and I like the idea that Sveta changed her. Sveta was able to take control and improve herself internally, and her reward for that was a solution to her external problem. Almost as if it's saying, you take the hard work to work on yourself, and the other part could maybe be solved for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could argue Chris has been looking for a quick fix to his issue, and Sveta did the hard work of the slow fix for a very, very long time. And maybe you could argue took it as far as it could realistically go before. And she wasn't even the one who reached out to Orchard anyway. So
yeah. Well, I mean, once again, showing that what I forget the last guy, the person that said it, but that community, like that false dichotomy, you get better through other people.
Yeah, other people help you and pull you up. Yeah,
yep,
love it.
Yep.
Farm Fresh Hornet says most of the Wild Bow characters who make a big change do so when they're hit with some sort of big consequence that makes them reconsider their perspective. Chris hasn't had that yet. As far as he can tell, lying and being an obnoxious piece of shit moves him toward his stated goals just fine. Those habits got him a place to stay, then a place on a Cape team, then prime seeding for a bunch of Cape fights, and they eventually carried him all the way to tyrant slaying and partial ownership of a planet. So from his perspective, why would he want to change? For comparison, I think the most surprising change in Ward was the one we got a look at from the very beginning, Victoria Dallin. Victoria changed because she learned that what it was like to be powerless and subjected to someone else's will. She had 2 long years without much to do except reflect on how she could have been better and possibly avoided all the tragedy, and the changes in her attitude and tactics show it. Her lack of empathy and awareness made her blind to the danger Amy was growing into. Now she treats everyone more gently when she can, even her enemies, because she puts the responsibility for what happened partly on herself, and she refuses to let anything like it happen to anyone else. Yeah, I love it.
I like that. I like this fundamental idea that to get to a place of change, like there has to be some sort of kind of motivation to that sometimes. Like,
yeah,
I think very few people just decide I'm going to change now.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I can like personally trace all of like what I feel to be like personal growth in maturity specifically to like terrible failures on my part where I was like, oh God, yep, that was me. That was my failure. And there's no other choice but to look at it and figure out what I did wrong and grow from that.
Yeah.
Because if that doesn't happen, then like there's a lot of pricks out there who never realize they've made mistakes or never make mistakes and thus never grow. So yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
Cool.
Lost Man 138 says one problem that Chris and Amy have is they're still under the influence of people who created them one way or another. Amy is still trying to some way please people, and Chris is trying to do what Labrat ordered him to do something big. I bring this up as Breakthrough has issues that can be traced to certain people, and easily argued that the group has in some ways inherited their problems. However, what makes them different to Amy and Chris is that they are actively fighting against their programming. Kenzie is trying to fix her problems and no longer lives with her parents. Rain has rejected the fallen ideology. Sveta is trying to make herself more human. Ashley has become a hero. Vera brothers, I'll get back to you later.
Interesting.
I do like that idea, is like that idea of moving away from the source of your trauma as a good way.
Yeah, sure.
to head towards recovery. Whereas Chris is actively still being lab ratty. Amy is actively just doing the same thing she did again. Just still doing it.
It makes a lot of sense. It's a very simplifying way of laying it out, actually.
Yeah.
FIP Industries says, my Doyleist interpretation of the matter is that he will eventually change because he is a main character, like he is a part of the original group, and knowing Wildbow, I don't feel he will leave his character as just statically bad. That would just be too simple. Now, the particular way in which he will be redeemed, I have no idea. He could see the error of his ways and return to Gimel with Breakthrough by his own volition. He could be pushed to a breaking point, and then he chooses the right thing. He could be shown as rotten through and through, and then at the last second, he does something meaningfully good to then promptly die. But that would be aping Alex arc. On top of that, there is the Watsonian explanation, the way he calmly says, say what you really think, instead of biting back or pushing away or running away as if he was defeated by Kinsey. Leads me to think that on some level he was lashing out precisely because he was looking to be taken down. On some level, his self-loathing was looking for someone to point out the ways in which he sucks, because maybe subconsciously he wants a wake-up call. He is miserable on Shin, and he is filled with regret, and maybe this will be the thing that makes him realize his mistake. I know this is a lot to read into one simple line, but he's my favorite character, and I really want him to come back to the main story. I love that, because I think we actually kind of didn't talk adequately about say what you really think.
Yeah.
Because it's this moment where, like, it's almost like he's trying to be quippy, but there's no force behind it. He's just kind of flatly says it.
It totally fails. Yeah, I like that a lot too. I don't think anyone, especially on this podcast, will ever fault you for reading too much into a single line. So you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I like that. I like that idea of like tell me, like, I am incapable of doing this myself. So I need someone else to call me out, because that again attaches to our idea of community, and it's through other people that you are able to get better. I sincerely hope you're right, FIP Industries. I like Chris a lot too, and I want him to be better as well.
Yeah, thanks for the answers, everyone. I actually felt like reading these gave me a number of new kind of angles to think about these things, and I'm kind of hoping that they sink into my brain and I use these perspectives going forward, because I, like, several times I was like, yeah, hey, I like that. And that sounds right. And that sounds important. So
yeah,
thank you.
For sure.
So our discussion question for this coming week is discuss an interesting example of playing with format or playing with the conventions of a medium, how it was executed and what the effect was from any piece of media. For example, the 5 dots in 14.9 or the space warping in 12.x.
Yeah, so we're not just limiting it to parahumans this week. Any media that is playing with the formatting in interesting ways, like those 2 ones.
Yeah, it'll be interesting collating the answers, because I might try to avoid spoilers, or maybe y'all try to avoid spoilers in your answers if possible.
If possible,
just because I don't know if people listen to this podcast so they can be spoiled on like 10 different random properties.
Yeah.
But anyway. That's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is at scottdaily85, and Matt's is at dglovetown. Dglovamail.
Double gloves. If you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
And you can find all the other shows we do over at our website, www.doofmedia.com. That's where you can find the Doofcast. This week we are covering the first season of The Expanse, the sci-fi television show. We're also holding our book club a week from yesterday, this coming Monday, where we're talking about 100 Years of Solitude, the Nobel Prize winning novel. I'm looking forward to that conversation a lot. It's a very interesting book.
Yeah, and go check out Deep Impact as well. They're getting into one of my favorite parts of the story.
Which story is that?
Pact.
There you go.
Huh? What? And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses like voting in our quarterly fan art and content and costume contests, Q&A sessions with Scott and I, access to live streams of our recording sessions, and our excellent Discord chat. Special thanks this week to new Bidoofs Owen J and Nathaniel P, both at the $1 level. We really appreciate y'all.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
And thanks for making all this happen. And as always, make sure you go over to Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow, and donate to him as well. This is his world. We're just playing in it.
And it's a cruel, cruel world. If you cannot afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. There are tons of ways you can help us out. You can share this podcast, and you can leave us ratings and reviews. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, but you can do that other places too, Matt. Did you know that other places have reviews? This week's Spotlight review comes from our pal Nuke Noodles, who left a review on our Stitcher account for this podcast. I didn't know you could do that.
Cool.
But you can.
Awesome.
Nuke Noodles gives us 5 stars over on Stitcher and says, the high quality of this podcast make me look forward to walking my dog in sub-zero temperatures. Yeah. Starting from We've Got Worm and continuing into We've Got Ward, Matt and Scott offer a great combination of literary analysis, great recurring jokes, and wonderfully awful puns. Despite reading Worm multiple times and lurking on the subreddit for years, Matt and Scott never fail to present a fresh perspective on Wildbow's work. Their constant work and support of the community inspired me to introduce several friends to Worm, support Wildbow on Patreon, and attempt a Weaver Dice campaign. Thanks for showing me new and great ways to love one of my favorite works of fiction. Well, thank you so much, Nuke Noodles. Nuke Noodles is one of our patrons on Discord and is in our StarCraft League.
Yeah,
they're
very
great.
strong StarCraft player.
Yeah, very good. Very good Zerg player. Those Teethy boys.
Yep. And thanks for those kind thoughts. I really appreciate that. And
yeah, we really appreciate it.
Glad we were able to enrich your life in this way.
Yeah.
That's it for this week's show. Next week on the show, we continue with breaking.
I'm tired of all the people breaking. Can we stop the breaking?
Hopefully we can start with the repairing.
What is a light term for repair? A sun-based term for repair.
Yeah, I don't want to say healing because...
Yeah. That's got some connotation.
It does.
We'll figure this out next time.
We will. Sintering. Okay.